I think it would be helpful to duplicate that, as we have been in touch with the EA before. So if members are agreed, we can have a brief discussion on that next week. Agreed? Okay. That is fine. So that takes us... sorry? No, not in the next item yet. So item 3 then is declaration of interests. So I'll just check if members have any interest that they wish to declare in relation to any items on the agenda today. No. If that changes or anything arises. Oh, sorry.
Only in case it comes up previously, the wife being a Board of Governor in both Mitchell House and in Grosvenor Grammar.
Thanks for that, David. Again, if anything arises, members can indicate and declare an interest if required. Okay, so item 4 then on the agenda is matters arising. So we have one item there, and it's just to refer members to a briefing paper prepared by Professor Colin Knox, and that is under the auspices of the Assembly Research Service. Members had a briefing from Professor Knox on Tuesday morning, and it was in relation to educational underachievement in Northern Ireland. I'd like to just begin at this stage by putting on record my thanks to Professor Knox for the briefing paper. It really was extremely thorough, and it sparked a really interesting conversation. So I think just initially at this stage, I would want to suggest that this really should inform our thinking on the forward work programme, and would suggest that when we reach that item on the agenda, we do have a think around how we want to maybe take on that issue around educational underachievement and tackling educational disadvantage in terms of future briefings. Would members be agreed? Agreed. And I would just also want to note that Professor Knox is taking a brief absence, short absence from his work here at the Assembly, and I would want to just put on record my thanks to Professor Knox for all his work and support over the last number of months to the committee. It really is very much appreciated, and your expertise has really been extremely helpful to the committee and its thinking on a number of issues. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to item 5, and that is the draft minutes of the committee meeting of the 29th of January, and that's at page 47 of members' packs. So I want to just seek agreement that those minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay. Just moving on to item 6, and I just check that the Minister and the officials are here. Okay, so please do feel free to bring the witnesses through. So I would want to just draw members' attention to, this is in advance of the item 6, which is the ministerial briefing, and we have a briefing note from the committee clerk at page 53 of your packs. We have a Hansard of the Minister's previous oral briefings with the committee in March and June of last year. That's at pages 57 and 75. Please take a seat and get settled. We're just going through some of the preamble. And we have then material from the Minister and the Department, which has been provided for today's session, and that includes the published Special Educational Needs Delivery Plan and Agenda for Change, and those are all in your tabled papers. So hopefully members have had a chance to review those. Okay, so you're all very welcome here. So Minister, thank you for your attendance at committee today and for the officials. So I'll just introduce, obviously we have Paul Givan, Minister of Education here today. We have Ronnie Armour, Acting Permanent Secretary at the Department. We have Lindsay Farrell, Deputy Secretary covering Education Policy and Children's Services, and Heather Cousins, Deputy Secretary within the Department as well. So you are all very welcome. I would like to put just on record at this stage my thanks for the amount of time you've been prepared to give committee today. A 2-hour evidence session is probably more than we expected that we would get, so I think that is something I think it's important to put that on record, that the amount of time you're giving to the committee today is very welcome.
Might regret it.
Well, we'll see who regrets it at the end. It might be 50-50 by the end of things, but we'll see how we go. So I would just want to say at the outset, not in any particular order, that the committee has been clear that it wants to look particularly at the issue of special educational need and educational underachievement. Those have been key strategic priorities that the committee has identified. So we will be asking specific questions on those, but we also wanted to leave time for some open questioning so members could cover other issues. So I think it feels appropriate maybe to go to an open forum of questioning first. We'll do that obviously after an opening statement, but that's the sort of order that I would be proposing we do that in. So really, to get things started, Minister, we're happy to hand over to you or your officials for any opening remarks that you would want to make. We've emphasised 2 hours is a good evidence session. It's a good time, but we'd like to just keep opening presentation up to 10 minutes so that we have as much time for questions and answers as we possibly can fit in. So it's over to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'll not reintroduce the team with me. That you've already been able to do that for me, so thank you for that. I'll go through the opening statement that covers a broad range of issues, and then happy to move into questions at that stage. Goes without saying that I'm always pleased to have the opportunity to engage with the Education Committee, and I know that today you will want to focus on a number of specific areas. Over the last number of weeks and months, I have set out my priorities and a clear agenda for change. Over the next weeks and months, I intend to build on this in moving forward with the next steps for education within Northern Ireland. And I've been clear that a highly educated population is vital to Northern Ireland's prosperity. Those who are better educated are more employable, they earn more, they're healthier and live longer, and we can't afford for anybody to be left behind. On the 21st of October, I made a statement to the Assembly on the independent review, and I also published a response to each of the recommendations. The panel's recommendations together form an important blueprint for the next 2 decades of educational improvement and reform. The review itself clearly recognises that its report provides a longer-term framework for progressive reform and will require a plan for phased implementation. In the autumn, I therefore drew on their report to set out my immediate priorities for a sustained evidence-based approach to improvement of the education system. Alongside the critical work of special educational needs reform, which is a key priority for the Executive as a whole, my focus will be on the core areas of curriculum, assessment, qualifications, school improvement and tackling educational disadvantage. Reform in each of these areas will be underpinned by investment in all aspects of teacher professional learning and leadership development, all wrapped in an intelligent accountability framework. And my approach is intentional. Educational research is clear that high quality teaching and learning are at the heart of driving educational improvement. Successful school systems ground changes in the classroom. Focusing first and foremost on teachers and the content they deliver, these are areas that have received limited focus or investment during the past decade. All need reflection, evaluation and improvement. For too long, we've focused on structural issues in Northern Ireland, whether that be academic selection or the types of schools. We need to focus on what children learn, how and for what purpose. That is why I've embarked on a comprehensive approach that focuses on supporting teaching and reforming curriculum, assessment, qualifications and school improvement. All are fundamental to educational excellence. The next steps for education in Northern Ireland must be underpinned by a commitment to investment and reform in each of these areas. This is not a task for any one individual or group, but a shared responsibility. And let me be clear, each of you has a role to play. I am committed to working closely with our schools, teachers, parents, pupils and communities to ensure we move forward together. Moving to some of the issues that you've indicated you wish to discuss today. On January the 13th, 2025, this year, I set out my vision to the Assembly for an ambitious programme of reform to ensure that our education system is structured and equipped to effectively meet the needs of children with special educational needs. I've now published the final Special Educational Needs Reform Agenda and Delivery Plan. And I welcome any questions that you have today and hope that you appreciate how these documents reflect my commitment to driving forward this change agenda during my mandate. My programme of reform has a clear focus on delivering earlier intervention and ensuring that school leaders, teachers and educational staff have the resource and skills to provide support for children and young people who have or may have a special educational need in school, without relying entirely on referral to external support services. As I set out in my statement, Where schools do need to access external support services, these must be delivered by experienced, expert professionals and must be easily accessible to schools. And my aspiration is that with enhanced in-school support, more effective and responsive support services being delivered directly to children and young people who need it will increase confidence in the system that needs can be met without, in all cases, recourses to a statement. We must also recognise the role and expertise within our special schools and place them at the heart of area learning communities to support inclusion across the wider school system. Reform on this scale cannot be a quick fix. It will take time, and be assured that some actions, though, are already underway or due to begin imminently. Streamlining of the assessment and special educational needs placements process will commence. The Education Authority's Operation Plan 2 was published on the 16th of January this year and prioritises strategic area planning for special education. Preschool education settings will receive additional resource for children undergoing statutory assessment, which commenced in November 2024, at an estimated total of £1.2 million in this financial year. The Education Authority will implement its graduated response framework and its new local impact teams model for pupil support services. The Education and Training Inspectorate has been commissioned to evaluate specialist education provision, including in early years foundation stage provisions. I've already mentioned that tackling educational disadvantage is one of my clear priorities, and my department already has a wide range of policies and interventions in place. Over £80 million is invested annually in programmes such as targeting social need, the extended schools programmes, the full service programmes and existing locality-based programmes. All of these interventions will help ensure an equitable foundation of support for our children and young people being in place to enable all children and young people to succeed. A key area in the A Fair Start action plan is promoting a whole community approach to education. This approach matters because a child spends only 14% of their lives until adulthood in a classroom and compulsory education. A whole community approach to education extends beyond the school gate and means children and young people are supported in all contexts in which their lives are lived. It recognises a learning and support continuum for children and their families or carers from pre-birth through to young adulthood and multiple pathways that can be available. I announced the Reay programme in May last year, and since then significant engagement has been taking place within 15 localities right across Northern Ireland in order to support the development of bespoke local strategic area plans. These plans will set out the key activities needed to raise attainment and raise aspirations in those areas. And I recognise the committee has a significant interest in this area, and there have been a number of questions around the methodology used for selecting the areas in which the programme will operate. I have published the methodology used and the data. I've said previously that we know a community is not defined by a red line on a map and that there would be flexibility. I reiterate that message today, and I have advised my officials that whilst the programme should mainly focus on meeting the needs of children and young people living in raised localities, there should be a degree of flex within how the funding is spent across a wider area of influence. And my officials are finalising the details of the processes to support the rollout of the programme and will be engaging directly with localities in the coming weeks. They will also be happy to provide a further briefing to the committee on that detail. Rightly, there's been much focus on the issue of early years and childcare, and I'm committed to bringing forward an early learning and childcare strategy by the autumn of this year, which will support child development, make childcare more affordable and enable parents to work. In advance of this, and recognising that people needed immediate help, I secured £25 million of executive funding in May last year to implement a package of measures in this financial year. This investment is already making a real difference to thousands of children and families right across Northern Ireland. And I have secured £50 million in the draft budget for 25-26, which will enable us to maintain the momentum into next year. Crucially, it will allow the Northern Ireland Childcare Subsidy Scheme to continue beyond March, which will be very good news for the thousands of families benefiting from it every month. In terms of the committee's interest in school uniforms, I'm delighted that the consultation on school uniform policy received such a high level of responses, and that the clear majority of these support the policy proposals. These policy proposals were also agreed by my executive colleagues on the 5th of December of last year. I am pleased, therefore, that through the drafting work of the Office of Legislative Counsel and the policy instructions of my officials, a final draft bill was completed in January of this year. This represents significant investment of time from OLC, and I place on record my thanks for this. I can update the committee that I have written to executive colleagues seeking agreement to the draft school uniforms bill and for me to introduce it to the Assembly. And I hope to shortly obtain this agreement, following which I'll write to the Speaker to confirm a date as soon as possible in the immediate weeks to come for me to introduce the draft bill to the Assembly. And I know my officials are scheduled to provide an oral briefing to you in March, and I want to thank you in advance for the scrutiny that I know you will afford the draft bill, which forms an important part of how we can make good legislation in this Assembly. And whilst we can discuss these points at length, the next steps for education in Northern Ireland must be underpinned by a commitment to investment and reform to ensure our education system is truly world-leading, excellent, equitable, inclusive, and able to meet the needs of all children and young people in an ever-changing world. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the opening remarks, and I'm now in your hands for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for pretty much keeping the time there, so that's appreciated. As I said at the outset, we're going to break the session into 3 groups just to make sure that we can cover a range of issues, and we're going to begin with just an opportunity for members to ask open questions. So I'll make a start. And I wanted to ask in relation to the 710,000 investment in the pitch at Lisneal, which was discussed on Monday at the Assembly. Can you confirm if following the meeting in June 24, you or any departmental official brought any influence to bear on the prioritisation of or the expediting in any way of that project?
I can confirm that I didn't bring any influence to bear, and the Education Authority confirmed that over the weekend. That there was no influence brought to bear on their decision-making process as a result of my engagement on this particular project.
Thank you for a clear answer for the record, Minister, and that is appreciated. To broaden that out just a little, would you accept that there had been, over the weekend, from when the story was being covered in the media, that there was a pattern of confused and quite confusing communication? We had a very, very late night statement from the EA on Friday, which felt unusual. It then transpired that some of the information in that around the usage of the pitch was inaccurate. It then transpired that information on your own department's website was extremely inaccurate in terms of the amounts that were being suggested for thresholds for minor works. Still looking at the department website, it now doesn't have any monetary figures associated with that. There does seem to have been confusion that has been heightened by the communications around this. Do you accept that the EA or your department has any role to play in some of these questions continuing to be asked rather than a line being drawn on this issue?
Well, I'll try answer them as sequentially as possible. In terms of the statement that it went out late, EA was providing a statement to provide clarity to that. I could see that there were members, some of which on this committee had been tweeting and putting out inaccuracies in respect of the story, and therefore it was necessary for a statement to go out. I think everyone would agree that shouldn't be going out at the hour in which it did. I think the intention was for that to go out on Sunday because details were being finalised, and it was my view that it was better to get information from EA out. EA acknowledge that the information that was provided in respect of the pitch not being used from 2019 was inaccurate, so that undoubtedly was regrettable. I've spoken to the principal of the school yesterday. It was one of his frustrations that had there been contact with the principal, he could have been able to provide that information to EA, and that would have made for a more accurate statement. And obviously then in terms of the figure to do with the 500,000, that had been provided for through Freedom of Information requests that had come into the department. The information was there, that figure was not the accurate figure in terms of the delegated limit. But again, I think the department holds its hand up and says that was an oversight. It should have been removed. That delegated limit changed quite a number of years ago and therefore the website should have been updated. And of course, having it brought to my attention that information was still there, I was clear that should be removed, because I could see why people may wrongly draw inferences from that being available. So I do accept that premise of your question, that that information has fueled part of this story, but it doesn't change the fundamental aspects of the story, which relates to a process that is taken and carried through by the Education Authority, not by me as the Education Minister, which some have inferred has been the case.
Thank you for that, Minister. Can you confirm that the threshold for minor works is up to £1 million? That is now the accurate figure that we should be looking at when we're dealing with these issues? Because I mean, there's now no information to reflect a monetary threshold on the department's website.
Well, I can assure you, because I of course have been asking these questions. 1 million is the delegated limit, but there are processes, and all of the relevant stakeholders know what the limit has been, know how that process has operated from the time at which has changed. I'm happy for a precise date whenever that change did take place. But by way of just some information, when it comes to the delegated limit of that £1 million, I'll give you an example, because this change, and Ronnie will keep me right, I believe took effect in 2017. So that's how far back it goes. One example in terms of funding for this, and it speaks to the point that are there schemes deemed to be minor that go over the 1 million mark, and there are, and at that point the department is engaged by way of a business case, because the Education Authority would need permission in that respect. Under the £1 million it doesn't. So I'll give you an example. In 2019 of March, at St Kevin's College, there was £1.5 million approved on a minor works which provided new modular units, 6 general classrooms and a 6th form accommodation, and that was through a minor works scheme, and it was there to implement what was an approved development proposal. So that was over the 1 million mark, but that did engage the department because of that as part of that minor works schemes. Within the Foyle constituency, where Lisneal resides, there have been other schemes approved. Holy Child Primary School at a cost of £960,000, and that was for replacing 3 mobile classrooms and 3 modular units. And there are other examples that I relayed in the Assembly. £7.6 million of non-controlled schools. That equates to 56 schemes. So I think what I find regrettable in this is the focus on one particular school in that constituency, and I know the principal who I've spoke to shares that.
Yeah, if I could just come in, I think remarks were made at the start of the committee which put very clearly on the record that there was no interest from this committee in terms of in any way trying to criticise or in any way call into question the reputation of that school. It is around legitimate interest that have been raised around spending of public money, and I hope that the questions will be taken in that spirit. So to widen that out then, just from beyond that question, I'll ask one final question on this issue. Are you satisfied as Minister that the current processes in terms of the schemes of delegation that operate for the EA to administer this money, in terms of how these projects are identified, how they are applied for, how they are prioritised, are you content that there is sufficient scrutiny? My understanding is that these come through the EA board with great regularity and they are marked for noting, so it seems to me to be entirely delegated to EA officials. I just want to get a sense, do you feel that has anything that has arisen over the last number of days given you cause to query whether there is the appropriate level of scrutiny over what are substantial sums of public money? And I want to be very clear, that's not a question about Lisneal, that's a question about your department's budget.
Well, I can speak to the levels of funding that go through minor work schemes, and it is significant. You rightly, Chairman, make the point that these go to the Education Authority board. How the board carry out its scrutiny and governance of that decision-making process by officers, I think, would be quite legitimately an issue for the board to be raising. We as a department obviously have a role in terms of the accounting officer type procedures, and Ronnie carries out that role. So I haven't got a concern. I look at the levels of funding delegated at below the £1 million, and in 2024-25 there was £30 million in controlled minor works and £34 million in non-controlled minor works. That includes special schools, a multiplicity of sectors, and that all operates within a minor works budget. And I absolutely encourage EA board members, where these decisions are being taken, that if they have concerns, they quite legitimately can raise them.
And I'm sure those will be raised. From your perspective as Minister, when we look at the scarcity of resource, and that is a theme you've returned to in the Assembly many times, that there was clearly a scarcity of resource in the department's budget. That clearly creates a scenario where there is a huge level of competition effectively for any resource or any capital investment that's going to go into a school. And every member around this table, and you yourself and your own constituency, will know the demand for investment is always going to outstrip the available resource. In that scenario, schools, I think, quite rightly want to know how are schemes prioritised. Who makes the decision that this scheme merits investment? So a scheme to bring a pitch to Irish League standards merits more investment than a roof that's letting water in. So it's who makes those decisions, and are you content that the processes for prioritisation are clear and transparent?
Well, I am, in respect of the processes that are followed. You're right, Chairman, to raise the constrained capital budget, and when it comes to minor works, they are restricted to what are deemed inescapable statutory requirements, health and safety being one of them. And for those that want to look at this particular scheme, an assessment was carried out in 2019. And again, that decision will be taken by the EA, but they're saying it falls within the current remit of their provisions. And the other areas: fire protection, safeguarding statutory obligations under Disability Discrimination Act. So you're right to highlight there's a scarcity of resource. I think I share that frustration, and I speak to that as a wider point, that when one school gets and another school hasn't got, they will raise questions and may have frustrations about that. My frustration is the underfunding of the Department of Education and our capital budget at a global level, and the bids that I put in to the Finance Minister not being granted. That is a global frustration, that rather than people wanting to take money off one school because their school hasn't got, we need much greater levels of funding for all of our schools. But it poses, I think, another question, that we provide funding in some limited areas around. Even recently, £4 million has went out to primary schools and nursery schools to allow them to purchase capital equipment ranging from £4,000, £5,000 to £6,000. They all were notified of that yesterday. You may say that £4 million should have been spent on replacing windows, and that is something that people will make a valid point on. Others will say, Minister, you approved last year announcements on major capital investments to take forward into contract, to the tune of tens of millions of pounds. School enhancement programmes, tens of millions of pounds. So we are taking forward brand new schools. And I again pose the broader question: which one of the new schools do members not want to go forward? Which one does the school enhancement programme to members
just
want
maybe
to go
come
forward?
in there, we're here to ask the Minister questions, not the Minister of Committee, but I think the point around scarcity of resources is perhaps one we could all agree on. Look, I think the other members will want to pick this up, but I have one final question from me, and it really is on the content of your statement to the Assembly today around your intentions for controlled schools management. And you set out your intention to establish a managing authority for controlled schools. And I think there was a bit of discussion in the Chamber around the independent review. So I just wanted to look at it through that lens of the independent review, because I'm concerned there was sort of a suggestion that there was maybe some sort of ideological objection to supporting controlled schools, which couldn't be further from the truth. I want to just get to the independent review's recommendations itself. So I'll quote it at 8.22 from Volume 1. And it states that in terms of the management of schools, we see the longer term objective as moving to a position where schools of all sectors enjoy the same support services. And then it moves on to say this would involve the establishment of a single authority for all schools, apart from those which are self-governing, but that in time participation from the integrated and Irish medium sectors would be included. That's the recommendation. There is an interim recommendation, which I don't dispute, around a directorate within the EA, and I think that's been rehearsed very clearly, and I'm going to concede. I don't have any major objection around that if there's a restructuring at EA level. But why has that wider structural reform that would deliver change for all sectors, including the controlled sector, why has that been ruled out of hand? I mean, I think from your contributions, you made a comment that if members want to have that single authority, then you'll have the conversation, but you're going to do something else. So I just wonder why the next action from the restructuring within the EA is a new layer of bureaucracy rather than the structural change that was recommended.
Well, it isn't that it's a new layer of bureaucracy, because I think you've helpfully highlighted, and forgive me for not being able to just find the exact quotes out of the report. I provided them in the Assembly, where the independent review recognised that the current structures are suboptimal for the controlled sector. So that is unique to one particular sector, which is the largest sector, which reflects controlled schools, controlled integrated schools, Irish medium schools, special schools, all fall within the controlled sector, not what some, I think, wrongly classify as being unique to one particular community.
Haven't attempted to do that, Minister.
So what we need to do is provide that immediate support for an important section of the education system, but that in no way prohibits us moving forward to the wider objective. But that change will take time. I think it would be wrong to allow clear failings for the controlled sector to go uncorrected. I want collaboration. I want to facilitate all of the sectors working more closely together. But we need to address the initial.
Just to be clear, we've got the change within the EA, and that would start to look at those issues that there maybe are particular to the controlled sector. So it's the next step that I'm interested in. So the next step looks to me like another layer of bureaucracy. So are you adverse to structural reform of the education system?
No, I'm not adverse to structural reform of the education system, but the independent review recognised the suboptimal arrangements for one particular sector, but it also did recognise if you could go to a single managing authority, that is something that should be pursued. I think I would be interested to know from other managing authorities if they want to relinquish the current arrangements in order for us to get to that end single authority status. But that should not preclude us addressing the issues for the control sector. But this was a task force established. My department was on it. EA representatives were on it, and they engaged with the other sectoral bodies as well in forming that. And I suppose I would encourage, again, it's for the committee. The task force report is now available. It's been published. Rather than take my word for it, bring them in.
We are. They're on the forward work plan, Minister.
And I think you will find within the research and the evidence gathered from controlled schools their very clear opinion that they have not been well served for many years by the Education Authority. And I think it would be wrong for people to turn their eyes and ears from the criticisms legitimate coming from the educational professionals. And we should be careful not to view it entirely through a purely political prism in terms of what we're trying to do.
I think we have Hansard here. If you read back my comments, I was very clear that I do concede there are issues that need to be addressed that are specific to the controlled sector. My issue is around what's the next step beyond addressing that. I'm concerned that there does seem to be a lack of appetite for wider structural reform. I'm going to bring my remarks to a close at this section. Open up to members. I would say we'd be looking at up to 5 minutes per inquiry, so I'm going to have to, there's a lot to get through, so that will require both members and witnesses to keep a close eye on time if we are going to cover the issues we want. So I will, please forgive me, I am going to come in and interrupt if people are you sort of abusing the time scales on this, because we want to hear on as wide a range of issues as possible. So I'll bring the Deputy Chair in at this stage.
Thanks, Chair. I attended the Corleone and Gael Sculliot event in the Long Gallery yesterday, Minister. You didn't manage to make it yourself, neither did the Permanent Secretary, neither did any of your directors, neither did any of your deputy directors, so I'm sure that was well noted by the sector. What they did point out was that 60% of their accommodation is substandard. I know of one case in Irish medium school where they're in mobile classrooms for over 20 years. And I suppose, and the chair asked you this question, but you weren't very clear in outlining what the process is for prioritising minor works. So there's a roof leaking in a school, in one school, and another school wants a football pitch. How is the prioritisation done?
So the prioritisation, it's health and safety, fire protection, safeguarding statutory obligations under the Disability Discrimination Act. That is currently, in terms of trying to keep schools open and safe, as to what we're doing. I think there are questions that can be asked around schemes that are being funded within that delegated limit. I think that's legitimate, and people can ask that. The EA have a board, and they can ask that. And also, I also have visited extensively Irish medium schools. Your colleagues have had me, invited me. I have to say I've been incredibly well received when I've been there, and I welcome that, and I very much support them. But they have also noted in my major capital announcement, School in Drogheda, that I announced in the Ormer Road for a new build. So I think
In the pipeline a long time.
and I approved it. So it may have been in the pipeline. I can account for decisions that I take,
Because it should have been approved.
but there's also other schools, Pat, Mr.
But-
Shane, that could be approved as well. I approved that one to take it forward.
Okay, fair enough. But you couldn't manage to walk up the stairs to the event yesterday. Now,
Well, I think
let's
judging the
get back.
evidence of
Let's
all
get
of my
back to
engagements with schools.
Let's get back to
there.
List Neil. Let's get back to List Neil. So, here we have a school that has 3 grass pitches. It has one 3G pitch. It has multiple tennis courts. It has indoor facilities, including a fitness suite. I know of at least 2 schools in my constituency that have no pitches at all. I know of other schools that are playing on gravel pitches. I was playing on gravel pitches 50 years ago. And you're going to tell me that, and the EA is trying to tell us, that the decision to fund the artificial pitch in Lisneal College and bring it up to Irish League standards was done on the basis of inescapable health and safety pressures. Now, we were also told the pitch wasn't being played on. It has been played on right through this period from 2019 when that report was done. Your colleagues have visited the school on a number of occasions, including in 2022 when Gary Middleton and Michelle McElveen visited the school. And they actually visited, and Gary put a tweet up, and he said they visited the sports pitches to discuss ambitious new plans. So tell me why that £710,000 is going into Lisneal, and there are other schools with water coming through the roof and kids out playing on gravel pitches. If they're lucky in some cases, other schools don't have any pitches.
And I have visited those schools as well. Newry High School only has a...
No problem, but tell me why one school is getting it that doesn't need it because they already have 3 grass pitches.
Well, Mr. Shane,
Explain that. Explain that to the people who are watching this committee now.
I think the public rightly ask questions of schools that have and schools that have not. And we have carried out a survey of schools that do not have adequate sports pitches.
Tell me why this school, which has already got state-of-the-art facilities, is getting more funding, and other schools that have nothing are getting nothing.
Well,
Explain that.
I think you can ask questions of all schools, some that have an abundance of facilities and some that have very limited.
We're talking about this case.
Well, I know,
Lisneal College.
I note you're asking about one, and it's not lost on me and the school that you keep asking about one when this issue can also
This
be...
is the issue that is in the media at the minute.
Yes.
This is the issue where a considerable amount of funding has gone into when it doesn't need it. Now, you explain that.
And
I'm not criticising the school in any way, but this seems to be a pet project for your party, and it's beginning to smack of cronyism.
Well, it's not. I have visited nearly 150 schools, some that your colleagues have invited me to, unashamedly push me to put money into that school. No mention of
Absolutely
criteria.
no difficulty with any school asking for anything.
Right.
It isn't they who decide where the funding goes. That's down to you. The buck stops with you.
So, again, to repeat, £1 million is the delegated limit that EA took the decision on. Unless I'm mistaken, Mr. Sheehan, you have at least 2, if not 3 reps on that particular board. So
you're not concerned. You're not concerned about this funding going to a school which already has state-of-the-art facilities.
I'm concerned about all schools, those schools that have and those schools who have not. That's why I'm taking forward the physical education curriculum-led capital programme, because when I went to Newry High School, they highlighted to me the neighbouring schools all around them. I note they're the only controlled school in Newry, and they said, look at all of these facilities and new builds, and look at what we have. And I think they rightly challenged me to put more support into their school. Just as
why wouldn't they?
And why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't they?
So why single
But
out
why,
one
if
particular
you had gone to
school?
one of the other schools in that area that you're talking about, who already had state-of-the-art facilities, and they asked you for more, would you not have said, hold on a second, there's a school just across the way here that has nothing, and I need to prioritise that school. You already have plenty here, and that's what's happening in this situation in Lisneal. So let's explain why that is happening and why other schools have nothing. Why 60% of accommodation in Irish medium schools is substandard. Why some children have been in mobile classrooms in an Irish medium school for 20 years.
So in the Foyle constituency, £7.6 million has been spent on non-controlled schools, 56 schemes. One Catholic maintained school got a brand new 4G pitch. I don't hear the member raising concerns about that expenditure, but I do hear, and the school hears clearly, the repeated focus on one particular school. And you contact the school, not me. I encourage you to do it because you're invoking the school.
The school aren't delivering the funding.
Will you ask the school?
The
Because
school
I
aren't
have.
delivering the funding, and you're not going to answer the question, so I'm going to move on to some other issues.
Well, I have answered the question. You just don't like the answer.
No, you haven't answered the question. You haven't answered why that school got and other schools don't get. So we've discussed that issue. I mean, this is a sort of characteristic of your tenure so far, Minister. There's a lack of transparency and a lack of accountability. Your refusal to answer questions. So you were asked a question in regard to your decision around the proposed transformation of Bangor Academy to integrated status. You said you weren't doing it on the basis of the issue of reasonable numbers, that there weren't enough Catholics in the school or in the surrounding area. You still haven't answered what you think a reasonable number would be. Do you want to tell us that today?
So, Mr.
I'll just wrap this up here also, because we have a similar issue in regard to the Reay programme. For some reason you decided, and you've never explained this clearly, why you developed this complex and convoluted eligibility criteria to apply to this programme. You've never told us yet what weight you're given to each of those criteria that you have set out. Similarly, in the issue around integrated education, you haven't set out what weighting you've given to the other issues apart from reasonable number in the integrated education bill or act. Sorry. So all of those issues are creating for us a view that you're not being transparent. You go into the chamber, there's bluster, there's belligerence, there's insulting people who ask questions, when what we're looking for is honesty, integrity and transparency. We're not getting that. We're getting deflection, we're getting insults and we're getting bluster, and we're not.
Deputy Chair,
we're not,
if I could ask the Minister to respond briefly to those. There's a lot of material in there.
We're not getting transparency. And that's what people are out there looking for. And we're looking at particularly in around how funding is being delivered. And that's a question you must answer.
Minister, if I could ask for a brief response, because I do want to make sure that all members get an opportunity to come in here. So if I can ask briefly, and then we'll bring in the next member.
Well, obviously I reject the characterisation of everything that Mr. Sheehan said in terms of the lack of transparency and honesty, integrity. I find it a bit rich coming from Sinn Féin. About honesty, integrity, transparency. To just go read some of the reports around things debated in the Assembly about your party and then come back to me to talk about honesty, integrity and transparency.
We're here to talk about education, Minister. If you see if you can't stick to that, don't bother.
No,
don't bother. If you can't stick to what your job is, our job is to hold you to scrutinise what you're doing and what your officials are doing. That's what we're here for. We're not here to talk about anything else.
Well,
return to the issues of integrated education.
I understand why you don't want me to talk about those things, Mr.
You can
Sheehan.
talk about them some other time. You get plenty of chances in the Assembly. You've been insulting people over the last few weeks in the Assembly, including one of my colleagues, and maybe you'll have something to say about that later.
Well, I'm glad to see you've calmed down from Monday. I've certainly tried to come here in the spirit of cooperation.
I wasn't here on Monday.
Oh, okay. You've saved it for today. Yeah. That's good. In terms of the
response, and then I'm going to have to bring this to a close, or we won't have time for other members. So.
I'm in your hands, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, brief response.
No, if you want to move on,
but I think the two questions we get an answer briefly, and then we'll close that one.
Sure, of course. So on the transparency aspect of it, just again to assure the member, whenever it comes to accountability, I've answered over 2,000 questions from the Assembly. I see the member doesn't want me to give him the answers. So I've engaged extensively with all members of the Assembly when it comes to it. When it comes to the Reay's programme, I touched on that in the opening remarks in terms of the methodology. That's all publicly available, and it's there. I provided that to all executive ministers. I understand the now Finance Minister met with my officials, engaged on the particular issue. So if there are specific issues of concern to Mr. Sheehan,
what weight are you giving to each criteria?
All of the methodology is all there, publicly available. So I'm happy to get specific answers to areas.
You don't have them to hand now?
No, well, when it comes to the localities, I said in the opening remark, I heard what people said around flexibility. I've asked my officials, can we provide some flexibility? West Belfast is one of those areas that I know it's been raised to me about some areas that they would like to see included. It's one of the reasons why I've said, can we provide flex within those localities? But I've also met with some of the members' own party colleagues outside of Belfast who are delighted that their area is being included, and rightly so, that we have a geographical spread so that as far as we can, we provide support to as many people as we can. But I get, we have a limited resource available to us. Not everybody then can get that resource applied to them. I would love there to be more funding in the education system to allow us to do even more than what we are doing.
I'm going to have to ask for it to draw this one to a close, because members are not in a consensus are going to get frustrated if they don't get the opportunity to come in. So I've given additional time to the Deputy Chair. From here on in, members will be receiving 5 minutes each, and that will be applied equally to everybody. I don't think we will be able to get through the evidence that we need to today if we take this long for each inquiry. So I'm asking everybody to work with me on that from here on in, and it will require both members and the Minister to cooperate in that regard. So Michelle had indicated next. I'll bring her in, and then we will go from there.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for being here today. It's definitely appreciated. Minister, I'm going to start with just following up again with some of the questions around Lisneal. I know you came to the Chamber on Monday to answer questions. You responded to all the questions. I'm not sure that you perhaps answered all of them. So I want to take you back to a question that my colleague Nuala McAllister asked you. She said that your department told the Audit Office in November that your department could only afford urgent repairs and statutory requirements. She went on to ask, why is a football pitch that needs to be made up to the Northern Ireland Football League standards an urgent repair or statutory requirement? So in your answer, to be fair, you started off with having a bit of an insult at my colleague, which I don't think was great. You said the pitch was 20 years old, and an assessment in 2019 said the pitch needed to be replaced. So the question I'm asking, which leads on from what Nuala asked, is why did this pitch not just need to be replaced, but needed to be upgraded to the standard of FIFA pitch?
So again, I'm repeating some of the responses because Mr. Sheehan asked me the same question, and I addressed the issues around decisions that are taken.
I think it was much more specific than Pat's, I think. So why was this pitch not to be replaced but upgraded? Because this is an upgrade, not a replacement. This pitch now is a FIFA standard pitch that's going to be produced. So why was that approved? And I'm assuming you have the answer because you had that question in the Assembly earlier in the week and you've had time to go and reflect on that. You didn't answer it at the time, but I hope you can answer it for us now because it's an important question and people would like to know what that rationale is.
So again, I've outlined this decision was taken by the Education Authority. It is not for me to speak for the authority that had the responsibility for taking this decision. I've also said that there are legitimate questions that I think the board could be asking of the expenditure of these schemes. So, when it comes to the decision-making process, I did not take the decision, but it is notable the repeated focus on one particular school in respect of this.
I haven't mentioned the school. I've asked about the upgrade of a pitch. I've not mentioned the school once.
So do you want to apply it then to other schools where pitches have been upgraded rather than to broaden it out? Thank you. I think
it's this pitch,
it answers
not
the
this
question.
school.
It answers the question that it's about this particular one that you have a focus on. So I've answered that question already. When it comes to the decision-making process, the EA took the decision in respect of how this was funded. So it's the same response that I've provided earlier in the meeting, and I appreciate members rightly, Chairman, should ask questions. Speaking to the first point, typically I will respond as best as I can based upon the nature of the question that comes to me. Some members, we're in a debating chamber, that can be challenging, it can be robust. I note you also put comments on your Twitter feed that were not particularly appropriate about me. So you can do that on Twitter, and that's a matter for you as to the language that you wish to ascribe. But I don't think then it really gives you a lot of credibility to then question me on how
I think it would be helpful if we could stick to the issues that this committee is concerned with, not individual members' Twitter feeds. So Michelle, if you have another question
related to this issue, Mr. Chairman.
Facts and accuracy, that was something that you said repeatedly in terms of your contribution on Monday, that you were bringing facts and accuracy to this discussion. I think from the comments that the Chair has already raised, there was a number of probably key points that weren't facts or accurate in terms of the minor works limits and in terms of the EA statement in terms of that pitch being closed in 2019 when it wasn't. The best way to get the facts and accuracy around this, I think, is to be fully transparent around the paper trail. Are you comfortable to release the feasibility study that was done in 2019 and any of the other paperwork associated with the identification of need in terms of the tendering, etc.? Can we get that into the public domain? Because I think that would provide assurance to people.
I don't think we have restricted any requests that have come in for information. So, I'm sure EA will be more than happy to facilitate the paper trail, the evidence-based decision-making process. I would have no difficulty with them doing that for this scheme and every other scheme that they have decided to fund through their minor works delegated limit.
I have just one more question to keep me in time. Integrated education, we've already raised the issue of Bangor, and I think it's been well rehearsed in the media that you didn't follow the advice of your officials when it came to making that decision, which is your prerogative. The specific question I think I've asked before again in the chamber but didn't really get an answer, so I'll ask it again today, is did you seek any additional legal advice that helped inform your decision not to approve the transformation scheme in Bangor?
So this development proposal was treated like every other development proposal that comes to me. The same assessments carried out within the department, and then it comes to me for a decision to be taken, and so I take the decision following all of the normal processes. I didn't commission independent legal opinion on this decision, nor have I ever commissioned independent legal opinion on any development proposal.
I think the parents and staff in Bangor, given how disappointed they are in how this decision has been reached would expect me to ask, is it the case that you just didn't want to be the minister who signed off the biggest integrated school in Northern Ireland?
I'm the minister who has signed off 5 development proposals for schools to transform and to become integrated. I'm also the minister who has approved development proposals to close schools, including controlled schools. So each individual...
The minister who didn't run against your officials' advice in terms of a school, I think it was the Queen Elizabeth II school, to keep it open when the advice was to close it. So, you know, you've got examples there of both sides of that, really.
So it's not unique, you know, that a minister will take a decision contrary to advice that has been provided. I'm not the first minister when it comes to development proposals who have taken a different view, not just from within the DUP, but whenever other parties held this position. So, you know, but I suppose defend the right for democratically elected members of the Assembly who are ministers to take these decisions. But I fully accept, and that's why I sent a letter to every single parent in the 2 schools in Bangor, outlined in detail the rationale for the decision that I had reached. And I also absolutely welcome and support their desire to be inclusive and open to all. It's my desire for every single school in Northern Ireland to be inclusive and open to all. But I also have a legal framework upon which that I have to take decisions. I considered that legal framework. I don't believe that my officials gave appropriate attention to the statutory framework which exists when it comes to this. That is a view that I have, but it is a view that others may well disagree upon, and they're entitled to have their view on that.
Danny, you'd indicated next.
Chair, thank you. Minister, just before I start, have you any reflection on the comments you made towards me on Monday in the Chamber?
On Monday? I think the member in posing the question...
Okay, no, it's fine, no problem. We'll get straight into it. Minister, are we being misled? EA released a statement, according to you, on Friday night because of remarks that were being made on Twitter. Now, I'm not on Twitter, so I didn't see any of them. Didn't talk to the school, but then released another statement saying the pitch was now in use when it originally wasn't in use. Are you not concerned that for the health and safety concerns are that the users of that pitch have been using it all that time? Is there not concerns around that there? And do you know exactly what the EA is going to deliver for this funding, exactly the specification?
Well, EA, and I said it in response to, I think the chairman, Mr. Sheehan, asked me about this. EA did put out information which was not correct. Yeah. They then corrected the record for that.
Are you concerned about that?
Well, yes,
yeah,
of course, good. I am concerned.
And do you know the full specification of this pitch?
No, I have not went through the full specification of the pitch.
I think as the leader and the Minister for Education that you really should be concerned about it, considering, look, I used to sit on council, you can deliver a pitch for a fraction of that money. You know, if I quote what you've said, in 2024 your department told the audit office that minor capital works and maintenance budgets were to focus on priority needs such as statutory requirements, emergency and urgent repairs. Now, can you explain to me how bringing a pitch to a standard of Irish League falls into those requirements for you as a minister? Why you're not asking those questions? It's not an issue with one school getting over another school. It's the fact that this is a massive upgrade of a pitch. For what purpose?
I'm repeating the same responses that have been asked.
You haven't answered that part of it.
Well, the record will show the answers that I provided to the same questions, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to repeat the same
so
answers.
You're not going to answer my question of why it's up to the standard of an Irish League pitch. So, okay, Minister, so do you believe that it's in the public interest to be investing hard, and you've said it, you don't have enough money, your budgets are tight, that you're going to consider then a spectator fence to be fair, to be a fair funding for an upgrade when a school does have broken windows, it has a leak in the roof? Do you think that's fair? And that's not me picking a school. Look, tell me how that's fair.
Well, you are picking on the school.
No. I'm talking about the upgrade of the Irish League standards. Why is there a spectators fence?
Well,
why?
So again, there is a singular focus on one school.
No, I'm asking the question. This is public money, Minister. Why is it being spent from the EA education budget for Spectators Fence?
When are your members on the education board going to ask that question?
I'm asking you as the minister. You are the Minister of Education,
They
you're the
have
leader of
more
education. I'm
influence
asking you,
on the
why is there
Education
Spectators
Authority.
Fence being applied to this?
So rather than being angry
I'm
and
not being angry.
Well,
You won't
you're-
answer my question.
you're
not answering the question, Minister.
No, well, again,
So all you're doing is feeding into that
So you
perception,
don't give the
and
opportunity
labelling
to
me
answer it.
sectarian is really just a cover from the real fact that this is. And Pat
So
said
I'm-
it's cronyism.
Peter,
Let him
sorry,
answer the
Peter,
question.
you're not in the chair. I'm going to give the minister the opportunity to answer the question. So we'll see if you're going to answer the question. I'll hand back to you.
the premise on which Mr. Baker raises all of this is wrong. It is incorrect. And it is a singular focus on one school. Despite,
incorrect about what I said?
You can interrupt me again.
What was incorrect what I said?
Interrupt me again.
You are the chair.
I was just if you give me,
But
David,
sure.
can I just be clear? Can I just come in here? I don't need interventions from either side to direct me how to chair the meeting. I was about to come in to say I have given the minister the opportunity to answer the question, so we do need to give him the space to do that. So, Minister, to respond to Mr. Baker's question.
Well, I appreciate the space to be able to do that again, and hopefully Mr. Baker hears the response. I outlined right at the start of the meeting in response to the Chair's question, Mr. Shane's question, these decisions are taken by the Education Authority. And they have questions that the members have.
Are you not concerned?
Sinn Féin have members on the board, and I have outlined my concern about the schools who have and those who have not. But it is
Minister, all due respect, I'm not asking that.
So
I'm
we'll
asking
keep-
you as
so
the
we-
leader of education.
So we interrupt
concerned.
again,
No,
and that's
you're
the
not answering.
style.
I never asked the question that was what Pat asked. I didn't ask the question that Michelle asked. I asked you a very specific question. You're refusing the answer.
I'm
Now,
not
I'm using up
refusing.
my time asking you. I'll ask you one more time.
You don't like the answer.
No,
That's
you
the
haven't answered
problem.
it. Are you satisfied that that's the best use of public money when we have schools with leaking roofs that there will be a Spectators Fence around this, and that you could deliver a pitch, you could replace a pitch for a fraction of that money, but we're not. This is being to a higher level. Are you not concerned about that, Minister?
So what concerns me is providing support to every single school in Northern Ireland, because they all have maintenance needs. They all require investment to be made into them. Your party controls the Department of Finance. So your frustration,
We need to end the minister just to
Minister,
finish this
answer-
point, because this is a new point that the minister's made. I just want to let
your
you finish that point.
your frustration, I absolutely share. How do we get more investment to address these issues for every single school? It would be by giving my department far greater financial resource. The bid that I put in was over £500 million, and I got half of it. And now we have scenarios where people are concerned that some schools get, some don't, but the member is not remotely concerned about other schools in that constituency from a different background that has had funding provided to it for a football pitch, for a sports pitch, but it doesn't suit, it doesn't suit the member's narrative.
I want to give Danny the opportunity to respond.
I have never said I'm going to take them from one school to the other. I was
You're not
asking
concerned about the other schools that
I'm concerned
have.
about the upgrade of it to intermediate football level.
You're not
which you
concerned
haven't
about
answered.
other
And you're saying
other
about the
non-controlled
finances,
schools.
Minister.
You're not
Minister,
concerned.
you
Given
are
the
the
minister,
minister. You have priority your budget.
Danny, Minister,
you spent
could I-
£250,000
Danny-
on a phone pitch. You put your funding out there.
Just to be
Again,
clear,
solely
so I thi-
interested
I'm-
in
I'm-
one
I'm-
school
so, Minister,
says
I-
it all.
You just didn't
It
answer a single
says it
question,
all.
Minister. I think there's going to be more questions from those who are asking.
Excuse me, can I just remind everybody who is in the chair? So I am going to request that a line is drawn under this line of questioning, because I don't think we're getting anywhere, and I think we'll be back and forward on this. I'm going to bring in the next member, who is Kathy.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, just to go back on a point that you mentioned earlier about Newry. Newry's not in my constituency, but it's right on the border of it. And you mentioned about Newry High School being the only school not to have a pitch that all the rest of the schools around do. St Mary's High School has about 600 pupils, and they have no pitch in the same area. So just to clarify that.
They need investment as well, just like Newry High School need investment.
Oh, just on that then, last week, at the end of last week, with all the media and everything that was going on, I was contacted by 4 different principals. The first one who contacted me has to move their P1 and P2 class, their chairs, into the middle of the room, because when it rains, they get soaked. The water is coming through the window. The second has a heating system that only works from time to time. They actually have a hole in one of their fire doors that a child can put their arm through. How did the EA fix that? They put 2 fire signs on either side of that hole. The third one is using a mobile classroom that has holes in the floor and the ceiling. Of that classroom, they are using as their assembly hall, they're using it as a canteen, and they're also using it as their PE space. The fourth one has to walk their children from their school in the rain down the road to use a community facility that they have to pay for their children just to get PE. Now, Minister, with all due respect, I wouldn't even call these minor works. I would call these urgent health and safety issues that those children are having to face. Those 4 principals came to me and asked me legitimately to raise these issues with you today, to see what it is that you would say to them. They have asked me, why are our children not important? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say you're doing absolutely the right thing in raising concerns about lack of investment in those particular schools, as nearly every member around this committee does, and invite me to see those schools. So I think you're doing the right thing to raise those concerns. I raise those concerns on their behalf as an executive minister, hence the very ambitious bid that I put in to get capital resources to be provided to my department so that I can provide much greater levels of support. But the decision-making process on minor schemes within the delegated limit of £1 million does not rest with my department, it rests with the Education Authority.
Minister, and again, with all due respect, these principals out there don't say that. They don't. They are looking at their children in their school being able to put their hand through a hole in a door. They don't really. They see you as their education minister. They say you as where the buck stops. They see that you got, I think it was nearly £3 billion budget in terms of the whole executive. They see mobile phone pouches coming out. They see cases of not just lots of different schools getting enhanced facilities, but they have basic requirements that they can't. Again, not minor works. These are urgent issues that need addressed. Honestly, I have teachers in tears, principals in tears, and I've heard it. 3 out of 3 of those principals that contacted me, their words were, I was so angry. I couldn't even pick up the phone to the EA because they were so angry at that time. Is that right?
Well, if there are those urgent health and safety concerns that you're highlighting that present a risk to injury, they absolutely need to be fixed.
They're not.
They need to be. I am more than happy to engage, as every MLA asks me to engage with the EA. They ultimately will take a decision because I've just been criticised wrongly for bringing influence to bear on one scheme, but I regularly, whenever schools ask me to come, I will seek to get an update for them from the EA. How's this being addressed? How can we fix them? I have been in those schools. I have been shown windows that are not safe. I've been shown ledges that need to be fixed where blockwork has fallen out. Of course I'm concerned about that, and I expect them to be supported. So those concerns are legitimate. They are right to be raised, and I seek to provide what help I can by way of resources to the Education Authority, but it is still the Education Authority that will decide how that funding gets spent.
I still know, and they'll be watching, I'm sure, like many principals across the north will be. These are all words to them, and it really won't mean anything to them.
Well, to assure you, like I was in St Patrick's in Katy this morning before I came to the committee. I was there with the principal. I was there with, it must have been a dozen primary school principals. I engaged in a lengthy conversation about how we're supporting schools, supporting teachers, supporting our support staff, and they welcome a lot of the initiatives that I am taking. So I appreciate that for 1 hour we have focused on one school issue.
Minister, with all due respect, I'm not focusing on one school. I'm focusing on these principals who have contacted me.
People are at pains, Mr. Chairman. They don't want to say this is about one school. All of it is connected to the characterisation of this one school. 4 principals who
contacted me directly,
and they deserve to be
supported. With you.
And I've said that they deserve to be supported.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Kathy, Cara, you're in next.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, thank you for being here, and you'll be happy to know I'll be bringing it back to the Lisneal issue. Minister, can I ask you, you had talked there about, you'd said this was a decision made by the EA and you cannot speak for the EA. But if the decision was made by the Education Authority on the basis it was a health and safety concern, and initially they had believed this pitch had not been used since 2019, we know that it has been used, and we know that it has been actually used by a football club in the area as well. do you think, now knowing this, now knowing that the initial information they had received wasn't entirely accurate, do you think that this investment, as a minister, do you think this investment and funding should still be upheld?
I think Lisneal have absolutely every right to ask for investment in their school. As every single school has the right to ask for that investment, to engage in their public representatives to seek to get resources provided for their school. Then there is a process that will be followed, as there was in this particular case. And the Education Authority took the decision to fund this scheme. So they will have followed their criteria and processes in doing that. That is a decision
now we know
for
that
the Education
information
Authority.
they initially made the decision on isn't entirely accurate. So do you think that this should be relooked at entirely?
No,
or do you think
I am not going to get involved, as members are here, of singling out one school.
This isn't about the school, though. This is
I
about
know your
transparency
pains.
of the action and the investment.
You
Minister.
speak to the principal of the school and
I
you
will happily
ask.
speak with the principal.
Well,
I will
please do,
welcome
because
that
your
engagement.
foil colleagues still haven't spoken to the principal despite quoting the school liberally. That school absolutely feels this is purely about them. A school in Foyle being victimised and targeted, and I think a very political manner. And it's not lost
Okay,
on
Minister,
the school.
I'm on set time here, so I'll just dive a little deeper. We've talked about the importance of facts and accuracy. Can we get a commitment today that you will publish the health and safety risk assessment report carried out regarding this case and this investment?
Any documentation on this, there will not be any barrier from me.
That's a yes.
And there will be no barrier from me in any documentation being published. The Education Authority is the authority that managed this particular scheme.
So you would support transparency?
I have
around
no
that?
difficulty in
Okay.
I have no difficulty in any transparency. In fact, I support transparency on the funding of minor schemes right across Northern Ireland. And when I look at the information presented to me and in the Foyle constituency, there has been funded provided to the tune of £7.6 million for non-controlled schools. Notable, not one member so far has any concerns about how that expenditure has taken place.
Okay. Moving on then, Minister, in my own constituency, I attended a school which I could see visibly was crumbling down around me. They had a room that was fit for purpose to become a sensory room to assist with the children within their school that had special educational needs. Can you understand why schools, why principals, what teachers, just as my other members across this committee have said, are rightfully confused and frustrated that they're seeing this level of investment in a pitch that is being upgraded? Can you understand their concerns and their frustration with this decision?
In the exact same way that I have frustration expressed to me from principals that have seen investment go in to lots of schools, where schools get new builds, where some schools can't get a new build, where we have a pipeline of new builds. Those principals express that concern to me. But what is wholly inappropriate and wrong is to somehow pin this on Lisneal. That is.
Nobody is pinning this on this
Only one doing it is you.
We're merely.
Where have you been?
If I may, as a member of the opposition, Minister,
Just ask for to give
and
Cara
just
time
one
on
final
this,
question after this. None of us
be a
are
parallel universe that
pinning
you
this
live in.
on
Minister,
Lisneal.
Minister, the member was speaking.
None
so
of us
Cara,
are
if you can
pinning
return
this
to your
on
point.
Lisneal, and I welcome any and every opportunity to have engagement with that school and with that principal. We are merely asking for clarity and transparency on public funding through the Education Authority that will go to this pitch. Lastly, Minister, you passionately alluded to my colleague Michelle's social media comments regarding yourself. So I'd like to ask you about what many people are saying online and on Twitter, X, whatever you'd like to call it. Many are calling for your resignation. Many have frustration that you spoke with the LCC in regards to Irish language education in East Belfast. You've turned down schools that parents had a democratic vote on. You turned it down in their want, their desire for integrated education, and you've appointed former colleagues to head positions within education. Do you think you should resign, Minister, or why do you think people are asking that question?
So in terms of the online commentary about this, and I know the member has a particular concern about online commentary and abuse that takes place online, the amount of abuse that has been directed towards me has been unparalleled in my time as a public representative. Not that anyone round the table will be concerned about that. And the emails that I have received from one individual in particular, countless emails, comments in it that are appalling. So I'm sure the member is concerned about what has been said on Twitter and online, and rather than indulging the spurious, the factually incorrect information that has been on Twitter, the member should condemn both the abuse
Can you allude to what you're referring to?
Both the member could condemn both the abuse that I have received, but also condemn those who have put out factually incorrect information. That would be something that the member, I'm sure, would support as a campaigner for trying to deal with the online abuse that takes place for public representatives.
And Minister, I have been very firm that we as public representatives should never have to endure abuse on or offline. Factual comments today are regarding you did meet with the LCC, you did not allow schools to integrate despite parental vote that was democratic, you didn't uphold that, and you did appoint colleagues and former colleagues to high positions within the Education Authority. I don't think that warrants any abuse for you online or enables an environment where abuse is valid. Let me make that very clear. But the matter of today is this is about transparency. This is about ensuring that you, your department and the Education Authority enable us as a committee to have the clarity necessary to ensure that things are being done in a fair way. And I want to apologise for that. Thank you.
Can I just come on quickly because
briefly,
you
because other
referenced
members
my
waiting.
Twitter account and I think you've equated it with abuse, and I hope that you're not inferring that what I put on social media was in any way could be characterised as abuse. I listed a number of things that are in the public domain that are factually accurate. I listed the meeting with the LCC, which was against the officials' advice. I listed the phone pouches, which many people were concerned about. It raised huge controversy in the media that expenditure had happened. I raised going against the advice in terms of the integrated status, and then I questioned where the SEN delivery plan was, which we have today, which is welcome, but do not characterise legitimate challenge and legitimate scrutiny of a minister with abuse, because I don't think that's fine. I would condemn any abuse online, but please don't characterise what I put online as in any way abusive.
You're here.
Very brief response, and then I'm going to bring other members in. And that's
Well,
the time allocated for that.
the member from Lagan Valley interjected unnecessarily.
I felt I had to defend myself.
Well,
I thought the inference was clear.
Well, I think it was unnecessary in terms of the interjection.
I think members had our opportunity to make our point.
I think
Do you want to respond, Minister, or should we bring another member in?
Well, no, I think the monologue that I was just subjected to from Miss Hunter speaks volumes, because all of it can be dissected in detail and given justifiable and rational explanations. But the member's not interested in rational and justification which can be based upon fact. She's interested in politicisation of these issues to score cheap points.
Absolutely. Draw a line there. So, David, you're next.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you for your answer so far, Minister. I think it has been through the looking glass stuff in some ways that people want to continue to talk about the subject of this pitch but pretend that they haven't heard of Lisneal in some way. Just as I think it's through the looking glass at times that people don't believe that ministers can engage with loyalists but feel happy to have people with Republican backgrounds sitting on committees. So can I thank you for your engagement with loyalists? I know it's appreciated by many people in my community.
Elected Republicans.
Sorry?
Elected Republicans.
Perhaps, but having a mandate doesn't mean that that's the only people that can engage. Loyalists are entitled to speak to people in government as well.
Those organisations are involved in drug dealing and extortion. Currently,
who are you talking about? Do you want to accuse anyone of
the organisations associated with the LCC?
Deputy Chair, I think we're giving everybody their time and their space to speak, so I pass back to David.
Minister, can I ask you to rehearse again, because I think there's been some questioning of today, but it's been a slightly different angle. Can I ask you to rehearse exactly the decision around Bangor Academy was taken, as has been noted, against the advice of officials. Can I ask the key points as to what your basis for taking that decision was?
So we haven't considered the development proposal in detail. I looked at the legislative framework that exists in terms of the decision-making process for transformation, and I think it's worth making sure that we know exactly what it says. And whenever it comes to Article 92.6 of the Education Reform Order of 1989, it says that the Department shall not approve a proposal under this article in relation to a school unless it appears to the Department that if the school were to become or to be established as a controlled integrated school, that the school would be likely to provide integrated education. So I looked at that legislative text, and within the body of the report, my officials also concluded that there wasn't a reasonable number, and there wasn't likely to be a reasonable number. I think it's for them to explain how then in the final analysis they came to a different recommendation whenever it came to the actual evidence within the report, because I drew upon what was found within the evidence for my decision. But it also goes on then to say in Section 1 of the Integrated Education Act of 2022, and it defines there that integrated education means that the education together in an integrated school of A, those of different cultures and religious beliefs, and of none, including reasonable numbers of both Protestant and Roman Catholic children or young persons. So the legislation defines clearly that there is a requirement for there to be a reasonable number. And of course that then brings into, well, what is a reasonable number? And I looked at the demographic breakdown within this area, looked at the current enrolment, and within Bangor Academy, you have 1,800 and just over 50 pupils, of which just over 50 come from a Catholic community background. And I think most people would say that does not equate to a reasonable number that would constitute integrated education. But you also have to look at, historically, what has been, and people are asking for a reasonable number. And in the past, and on NICE's own website, they speak about 40-40-20. As to what would constitute an integrated school. There has been guidance in the past as well in respect of this issue, and there was an old test that was applied by the department that you would need to have 10% of the minority community in year 1, and that would rise to 30% after a number of years. So applying even NICE's own 40-40-20, it fails. Applying an old test of the department's policy, it fails. And then I look at the statutory test that exists, and I believe that it doesn't meet those tests, and therefore I came to the view that I did.
Thanks very much. And then, so then leading on, you talked about the matter for officials. I know that Heather's here. Heather, I know from the documentation available on the website, you're one of those that cleared the proposal alongside a name and Broderick. Could I ask you how, in coming to your advice, you decided that that advice should be to recommend that the proposal be allowed on the basis of a 2.5% to 3% Catholic population of the school, and in doing so, could I ask you what you feel would be an unreasonable number? At what level that would have become unreasonable?
Thank you for the question. I do think this is a difficult one for officials because the Integrated Education Act is so new and doesn't define what is reasonable numbers. Officials provided their advice. That is published and on the departmental website, but it is only officials' advice. It is then for a minister to make the decision.
Advice with a recommendation, and that recommendation went forward even with a 2.5% to 3% population of Catholics within the school. I think I accept, or I hope you would concede that who the general populace in Northern Ireland, 3% of a populace of a school being from one community and the rest being from another and others would not necessarily be what they envisage when they hear the word integrated, and so would not necessarily deem it reasonable. Could I ask why officials did, and why you've cleared that on the basis of that on that 3%?
Well, I think that you can see that officials provided a full range of advice, and then
Can I ask you to comment specifically on the number, on the 3%? At what stage would that have become unreasonable?
We didn't actually look at numbers in total. We did say this is a very
Why did you not look at numbers if that was a key part of the criteria?
We have duties to promote, facilitate. That's what we.
Is there any number that would have been low enough for you not to have taken at first the duty that you're talking about to promote integrated education? Is there any number that you would have thought unreasonable? 0. Okay, well, I think that's eye-opening, and will draw a few eyebrows from those watching.
We take things in the round.
So
looking at
what is the point in having criteria if officials are not going to consider it?
Officials considered all of the
Well,
evidence,
you've just told
all
me that
criteria.
0 is what is
I
unreasonable.
just-
So
I
there's
gave
no.
you
So
an
what you're saying is
opinion.
there is no point. There is
I
no
gave
point at which
you-
you would have deemed that unreasonable.
I gave you an opinion because you pressed me for an opinion.
Yes. Well, I asked on detail, but I
Officials
think it's a
are-
remarkable answer.
Officials look at everything in the round in detail, look at all perspectives, all point of views. One of the issues that we're grappling with as well is demand. And when you look at parental votes, that's an indication of demand. And you look at our duties to facilitate, promote. That's basically where officials pitched their advice. They said it was finely balanced.
You're telling me you could have a school that is 100% Protestant or 100% Catholic, and you do not think it would be in any way unreasonable to have the integrated education label applied to that school? And if so, what exactly does the integrated label mean?
It's not really for me to say what I think the integrated label means. There are many very successful integrated schools. There are some integrated schools that haven't been so successful due to their location and so on. I think an important part of it was to look at what the plans were to move from the 3% to make it more integrated. And that's kind of what the finely balanced bit was based on. I think it's something that needs to be looked at in terms of where do we go from here. We have an old document on transformation that we are revising to look at what does it mean, what steps would a school have to go through in order to demonstrate that there was going to be integrated education. So we do appreciate that this is a difficult one, that it's not clear cut, and that we need to do more to clarify and help schools through a process.
I think some people would think the 3% was more clear cut than others would agree. I'm not sure you've satisfied me nor helped me with the definition of an integrated school, but in fairness to you, you're not alone in that. I seem to be having trouble getting what exactly integrated means. But
You've made your point, David. I mean, I think the point around the transformation journey is what needs to be focused on. That I don't think anybody has suggested when a case for change is made, the school should be the finished article and should be given space, in my view, to go through that process. Peter, I'll bring you in next.
Thanks very much, Chair. Perhaps refreshingly, I'm going to ask you about educational underachievement and special educational needs, given that we're slowly running out of time. Minister, we had an informal briefing yesterday from Colin Knox. I'm going to read out some figures to you, which you'll not have access to, but they're fairly straightforward. We're looking at examination performance. So pupils getting 5 GCSEs at A to C, which is sort of standard metric. Controlled non-grammar were scoring 53.6 across that, and Catholic maintained non-grammar were scoring 62.2. So I'll do the basic math for you there. Effectively, the Catholic maintained non-grammar schools are outperforming the controlled non-grammar schools by 8.6%. Okay, so they're doing significantly better as opposed to their counterparts. I suspect you will probably agree with me that controlled non-grammars need more support, and I did look up the line from the document we were discussing earlier from the independent review. The managing authority role has always been a challenge because the EA also provides a wide range of services to other schools. This results in complicated systems for school management, which are in particular suboptimal for the control sector. This has been compounded by the terms of the Integrated Education Act, which imposes on the EA the duty to support integrated education. Minister, in terms of dealing with educational underachievement, specifically within the controlled non-grammar sector, would you agree with me that it needs support? And if so, what sort of support would you think it requires?
Well, can I thank Mr. Martin for the question? I'm delighted now, an hour and a half later, to actually get into the meat of what education is about, what goes on in the schools, the classrooms and teaching. Rightly, the member draws out the differential, and I think that is to the credit of the Catholic maintained sector, who do excellent work, and particularly in areas of socio-economic disadvantage. I see it firsthand. there is really good work taking place, and there's a lot of learning to be got from CCMS and those Catholic maintained schools that are producing good qualifications. Controlled schools are not performing to the same level. Many good ones. I declare an interest. I was a controlled non-grammar school pupil at my school. So what can we do to help beyond, and we haven't got into Reay, and Reay is going to give us an opportunity and a whole community approach to help educational underachievement. But this is where we get into our curriculum. How relevant is the curriculum? That's why there's a review of the Northern Ireland curriculum taking place. And then flowing from that, what is the assessment process? And we need to get more data around assessment. How does that inform the resources that then we utilise to enhance teacher professional learning? Because what I hear so often from school professionals is we can't even get out. We can't bring a substitute teacher to release us to get teacher professional learning. So if we're going to drive up educational underachievement and maximise people's attainment levels, we have to drive it at curriculum. What's being taught in the classroom? How's it being taught? What is the best international practice? How can we learn from that? And nobody should have a settled view as to the right and the wrong about this, but it should be evidence-based. So I'm really focused on driving forward that wider educational piece around curriculum, assessment, teacher professional learning, and that will drive up standards in all of our schools. Lindsay, I know, is focusing on some of this for me in terms of Reay, and if I can maybe invite Lindsay, if you want to, we've had educational underachievement, the Fair Start programme, and we're building upon that in Reay. But Lindsay, if you want to add anything to that.
Yes, certainly, Minister, and we've already chatted about Reay already today, but I think that the Minister's key policy priorities that he's articulated there will be something that will also underpin the implementation through Reay. So whilst being very much community informed, Minister's really keen that we're using the opportunity to get closer to those localities, get closer to those schools, some of those schools that you're talking about, and actually dealing with the practicalities of what they require. Another key action around this will be our ongoing work to revise and refresh our existing school improvement policy, which is every school a good school. We want to be in a position to consult on a revised policy later this year, and within that won't just be around the policy, but it'll be around a new model for very targeted specific support to schools, and that will be support, just to be clear, support for those good schools to go from good to excellent, but also those schools that are perhaps facing challenges in terms of the issues the Minister's talking about around curriculum delivery, teaching and learning, and making sure there's very targeted, specific and high quality intervention and response.
Excellent.
Look, that's very useful, Minister. I mean, clearly it is my view that, and it's no reflection on controlled non-grammar schools, because I visit a lot of them, and the teaching they do is superb, and the leadership in them is also superb. I am very keen that controlled schools get equality, and I would call it equality in terms of the other sectors. I think the piece of work that you're doing around CSSC and managing authorities is pivotal in that, and I would encourage you in that. But I have limited time, and I want to ask you about special educational needs as well, because I think that's really, really important. And these are topics that we're now in our 30 into this session, and we haven't even covered yet. On your document, it is page 17 on special educational needs reform agenda. I'll let you flick to that if you want to. It's on the section, how much will delivery cost? And this is the brand new document, I think, that came out this month, that's looking at the reform of SEN. And on page 17, under that section, it says, while some actions contained in this delivery plan can proceed without additional funding, full implementation will require significant investment. The high-level estimated cost of delivery is 570 million over a 5-year period, okay, which is quite chunky. It's £500 million and about 100 a year. Can I ask a couple of questions just around that? I'm making an assumption that 570 is mainly resource, but I don't know, and I don't know if you want to clarify, is that all resource, or is there a resource capital split on that 570?
Thank
So that's what's very detailed and right in the middle of the document. So if you don't know the answer, you can.
No.
come back to me.
It obviously the document refers, the 570 million, and the independent review of education, I think, had a slightly higher figure than when we completed our end-to-end review analysis as to what it would be. So that is not an insignificant amount of funding that will be required to take forward the end-to-end review and now into that delivery phase. So you're right, it is significant. Of course, I will be seeking that resource to be made available to me. I hope to get support around the executive for it because I certainly will be seeking it. So that is the quantum of funding. But just to assure the member, we are also, we haven't been able to announce this just yet publicly, but it is public knowledge that I put a bid forward through the Transformation Programme Board. That funding was provided to the executive departments. All had to bid for that, and we have been successful in terms of securing funding for that, but we are still waiting final sign-off. That is going to kickstart this, but we need to get the final sign-off for it. So I know that we have got through the process and we have been deemed a scheme that should be funded, but the executive and the finance minister are still waiting to be able to provide the final sign-off, and that will allow me to kickstart part of our delivery plans associated with this. But we will need to do a lot more in terms of special educational needs.
And just on, that's very helpful, Minister. Just on that,
Consider we have just need to bring Colin in.
No.
I'm
I'm just keeping an eye on my 7 minutes, which is what everyone else got. So just on that 570, just to be clear, that will be additional money you will be bidding for year to year. Effectively, there'll be tranches of that coming in. How confident are you of getting that, and what are the implications if that is not put into your department's budget for this project?
So we will do, as we have been doing, the best to reform all that we do within education with what funding and resource that we provide. But if we're serious about making a really significant change and getting that earlier intervention, and we haven't had a chance to go into the detail of all of what we want to do on this, it will require resource. So it isn't there in my current department's budget. I haven't had a chance yet with 15 minutes to go to talk about the budgetary pressures in my department, but we are entering in come the 1st of April with a £260 million over commitment. That is a significant amount of money that we will require support to address. This will be additional to that over commitment. So I put it up there in headlights. Education is underfunded. All of the evidence demonstrates it's underfunded, and that if we're serious about changing our education system, it's going to require that significant resource to be provided. That is why, Mr. Chairman, we've spent an hour and a half on £700,000 when I am facing hundreds of millions of pounds of challenge, and yet we haven't yet had a chance to get into that in this session.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Yep.
Colin, I'll bring you in, and then there will be some time for some additional questions on other issues after that. So, Colin.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Minister, and your team for coming this afternoon. Minister, just 2 questions initially around SEN and the significant spend on the SPIMS units here recently is really notable across the board. So can I ask for your assessment on these units as an appropriate alternative to special schools?
Really good question, Colin, and thank you for having me up in North Antrim recently, where I was able to see some work in special schools, so appreciate that opportunity. We've spent £51 million on special education needs provision in terms of capital resource. Significant amount of that has been around the specialist provision in mainstream settings. But we've also had the inspectorate go in to carry out assessments in some of these settings, and the initial feedback has been positive. There have been some issues of concern raised, but overall the response and the feedback that we have had has been a positive one. And I was in Carr Primary School very recently, where last year I visited. They didn't have a SPIM, they wanted a SPIM. They now have a SPIM, it's full. and the principal is delighted, the parents are delighted, and the impact it's having is hugely positive. So significant investment has went in. We had to create over 1,000 places to accommodate the needs of children who hadn't got any placement, and credit where credit's due to the department and to EA. We were able to respond effectively to that, and we are continuing because we know there's more pressure coming on this come September time, and we very much have our eye engaged on how we're going to meet those needs.
Thanks, Minister. And I agree, some feedback is positive around the SPIMS units, and some isn't, unfortunately. There's some primary schools throughout the province sitting with 1, 2, 3 maybe SPIMS units within their schools. So can I ask, how will the experience of SENCO's teachers and classroom assistants be taken on board by your department to include kind of new approaches and the practices, as you talked about, emerging over the next decade or so?
So they very much are to the heart of what we're trying to do, because they're on the front line as the practitioners. So they have been engaged in terms of the advice that we receive as part of that end-to-end review, and as we now give operational effect to that plan that we need to now implement, and they will be very much part of making sure that what we do is working, because we know the frustrations, they're well documented, so they will be involved in that. Lindsay, do you want to pick up on how we're including the professionals in this process?
Yeah, certainly. So just in terms of the overall view of our system, if you look at where our children are being educated, so our children with special educational needs, 84% are in mainstream, 5.6% are currently in specialist provisions in mainstream, and 10% are in special schools. So there's a piece of work there around the model of education going forward, and that underpins the Minister's SEN reform agenda and the delivery plan. So within that, you will see very much structured around that right support, right time, right place, right people. And I think in terms of your particular question, it's around how we're using the expertise and resource that's in the system. There's a big theme throughout the delivery plan around building a confident, skilled and capable workforce, because we've heard strongly throughout the end-to-end review process that both teaching and non-teaching staff feel often disempowered and ill-equipped to meet the needs that they're seeing in their classrooms. Equally, we know there's a huge issue amongst our special schools, in that they require that ongoing support to build their expertise, but also that they want to be seen as a resource to be used. And so you will see, when you have a chance to digest the reform agenda and delivery plan, there's a key element in there around using the skills of our expertise as centres of excellence, as hubs, that hub and spoke model that will work in communities, drawing in those professionals and those practitioners from specialist provisions, from the special schools, and building and enhancing their capacity and capability. But there's a lot of work that EA has done around the quality assurance framework around this. So they now have that framework in place around specialist provisions in mainstream in terms of the conditions that must be met in terms of high quality specialist provision. We've also, as the Minister has said, ETI had conducted an initial assessment of SPIMS provision, and we're expecting part 2 of that evaluation to be available later this year, because we're very conscious that quality assurance piece and the confidence of staff are really going to be critical to making this model work going forward.
Thank you, Lindsay.
The time for one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then, Minister, just finally from me, the reform agenda states that the current system is broken by many parents. Can I ask what steps are being taken to address this perception?
So, this has been an area that we have been focusing on, and I have raised repeatedly with the Education Authority in terms of making sure that the communication has had to improve. It has been improving, and as measures are being put in place, there is improvement. But also to assure you that the Chief Executive of the EA has been engaged in this as part of the restructuring of the organisation at a very senior level. There will be a focus at director level on the special education needs process. So that will look at how EA respond to this, because again, they operationally have to carry out the assessments, the referral processes, when it comes to a statement being provided and giving operational effect to that. What I said in the opening comments, and I stand over it, it is a failure of the education system that parents feel they have to take recourse to get a legal document for services that they should be entitled to. That should not be necessary, and people in desperation feel they need to get a legal document, and then the frustration is, having got that, you still aren't able to get the services. So we need to move to a position where we're providing that support without parents having to go down that particular process. That is the shift that this entire SEN framework that we're trying to implement, which is really comprehensive. I encourage the committee, I know you will, the detailed implementation plan is there, and this will be transformative, but we need to be able to resource and support that. But we will do what we can with whatever resources are available to us to try and make that change.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Conscious of time, and the session has gone in the direction the session has gone in terms of what members wanted to focus on. By my clock, we have about 20 minutes left, so I'm content to bring everybody in for another short question on either SEN or educational underachievement. So I'll just turn to SEN first of all. And I just very, very quickly, and look, you've alluded to this in some of your comments, Minister, parental confidence is not high, and that is by virtue of the long history that we are looking at in terms of this issue. And I think it is important to emphasise that this is not an issue that you have stumbled upon, Minister. This has been 10, 15 years, and that's maybe a conservative estimate of failure. I think of failure to deliver for children and for parents, and I think we need to be honest about that in terms of what we're looking at. So while I think the desire for this to have the impact is very high, and I think the level of support this committee would want to give you in terms of doing that, I think we would like that to be very high. We want this to succeed. I think that is really, really important to note. Where and there's nobody is here wants to score political points around children with special educational needs. We want this to succeed. However, we also have stakeholders who are very keen to know what is actually going to be delivered here. So I really have two questions, and I'm very happy that you answer them quickly so that everybody else has time to come in. The first is, at my first scan of this, and it did come to us quite late, only came in yesterday, but my understanding is that in terms of the specific actions, I've already counted over 30 that use phrases trial, scope, test. I'm not sure, or pilot is another one, and I'm not sure that parents watching this will have a huge amount of confidence that more pilots are going to deliver the change that they need. They need it now. So I want to ask if, first of all, you could speak to that. Are we not at a point that we know what we need to be doing and not piloting different interventions? And secondly, and this committee has returned to this multiple times, and we will have our joint meeting with Health, which we're very much looking forward to. But at page 9 of the delivery plan, something left out at me that I think is really, really concerning, and it talks about working with health and social care teams. The local impact teams should be further developed to be multidisciplinary. I would have hoped we were way beyond the aspiration of what should be happening. And I know you're not the health minister, and I think there is a very strong argument we should have a joint meeting with both ministers in attendance, because the health minister has questions to answer in this regard. But you are the education minister. Can you offer this committee any assurance that we are going to move beyond what should be happening? I mean, if as an executive we can't get education and health to just do what needs to be done to put the right people in post to support the education system, then I wonder whether we should maybe pack up and go home.
And Chair, I've met with you outside of committee meetings on frustrations in our special schools and with the health service, and sought to try and use my influence on health trusts as best as I can. And we did have a meeting with the health minister.
And can I emphasise on that work around nursing provision is very welcome, and it's good to see collaboration there, but it goes way beyond that issue.
No, it absolutely does, and we reference it, and you've highlighted on page 9, and it talks about the speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, all of that wraparound of the allied health professionals that need to be put in place. The challenge, and we have it within this document, that we are saying that if the resource is available, we'll fund AHPs to be trained. So we're prepared to, if we can, provide funding to have more people trained that can be part of this process. So you are right in terms of the engagement with health. That's going to be hugely important. I understand the frustrations, the exponential increase in the numbers of young people presenting with additional needs, I think is one that I still don't know why. But we do have better visibility on that, and we need to move away from the reactionary to the forward planning. That's why Operational Plan 2 speaks to the needs for area planning based solutions.
Just because we are so short of time, and that's not I don't hold you responsible for that, Minister. The question around health, we'll pick that up. My first question was around are we not at a point of moving beyond pilots? I don't speak to any parents who say I'd love another pilot scheme. They want to know my child will get the services they need.
And that's where we moved from the end-to-end review, and we moved towards this timetable in terms of timeline of delivery and that plan. So in taking forward some of what we need to do, it is, and I said it, in response to Colin, Mr. Martin, resource is a challenge for this. So if we're going to be able to take this forward, it will take time, but it also takes resource, and that resource doesn't currently sit within my department to do it. So we need to get the resource to allow us to do this, to take it forward. But some of the measures that we will take, of course, we know there are things that work and we can implement. Part of the bid that we will take forward now, once we get final approval around transformation, it's going to be transforming the support model for children with statements. It is going to develop speech and language communication intervention programs to target 10,000 children over the next 3 years. We're going to develop inclusive play environments. We're going to have testing of the enhanced nurture program over the next 3 years. We're going to develop a model of special schools at resource centres, and we're going to design then inclusive capacity building programs, including teacher and classroom assistant professional learning. So there are things that we can roll out, but can I deliver everything that I published yesterday? No, I can't, because there isn't the resource to do it. If there is, I will be able to make the kind of transformative impact that I think all of us around this committee room want.
I'll draw it a close there because I know others want to come in, and I think I can speak for the committee. Consider it an open invitation to come back to do as many sessions to work through this delivery plan with committee, because we want to scrutinise it in detail. So that is I don't think I need to seek committee agreement for that. We're pretty clear that we're on the same page on that in that regard. So I'm going to give everyone else the opportunity to come in. I'll bring the deputy chair in, and it will be quick fire question answer and move on.
Thank you. Paul, I was asking you earlier about the Reay programme and the weight attached to each of the criteria, and you referred me to the methodology. I've gone back and I've looked at it to see the methodology, the ranking, the shortlisting, but there's no information available on what weight is applied to each indicator. Can you refer me to where I could get that?
Lindsay, do you want to pick up on?
Yeah, and it is set out, and as we've been through multiple times previously, areas were identified on the basis of all of those indicators. So the Minister identified he wanted to run a regional programme, Northern Ireland wide. The range of indicators were informed by a stakeholder reference group, many of whom were community representatives, had been established as a result of the First Start panel and action plan.
Those range of indicators, there's no weight attached to any of them?
Those range of indicators were used to identify areas, and then because it is an educational underachievement programme, the only very tangible measure we have was GCSE attainment, and that was used to then rank the list of areas.
Just on your say and delivery plan, Minister, I note the needs of the AME sector have been recognised in that. Yeah. So can I just ask you whether SANCOs in the IME sector who wish to have children supported by the right people at the right time and in the right place can access the new digital portal Ask Gilliga in Irish?
Well, I don't know the specific answer to that question in terms of accessing the portal in Irish, but you rightly highlight the recognition whenever it comes to the Irish medium. There is a need for support, and in the publication yesterday, it includes action to develop bespoke services to support children in the Irish medium sector. So that is one of the areas that we have identified that there needs to be support in. So I don't know, forgive me, on the portal.
Okay, well, sure, you'll come back to me on it. And just finally, this was the report issued yesterday by Correspondence Yale Sculliata. These are the 24 recommendations from the Review of Irish Medium Education in 2008 that have been colour-coded in terms of progress. None has reached blue, which would mean good progress, and none has reached green, which would mean the the recommendation had been implemented. As you can see, they're yellow, orange and red. Would you like to comment on that?
In terms of how we're supporting Irish medium in general?
I mean, that says a lot.
No, well,
It does say a
24
lot. We
recommendations
need
that
to hear
haven't
the
been
answer as to what it's saying very briefly, because I think there's a lot of people itching to get in. But
No, like I've said on countless times, there needs to be support for people whenever they want children to go through the medium of the Irish language, and I have no difficulty in that whatsoever. I've been at the schools, I see what's being provided. There isn't currently services in some areas that is meeting that need, and it is a growing sector that requires support. Some of the reasons why that is about the availability of workforce. Having people that are able to actually provide education through the medium of Irish is a challenge. But where I can provide support, I will provide support on that. I think anyone will struggle to find where, and I'm sure you'll be the first to identify it, has Paul Givan ever intervened to stop something happening within an Irish medium school? And I haven't, and nor would I, because why? I'm there to support all of our different sectors, and I'll continue to do that.
Kathy, you had indicated next.
Thanks, Chair. Just to go back quickly or really briefly on the point around the nursing in the special schools, and it was brought up earlier. It is welcome your intervention in some areas, but Knock Even Special School hasn't had any intervention. They still have no on-site nurse. I know I've written to you about it, Minister, but they would really appreciate your intervention in that. There was a really tragic incident that happened in that school recently, so I know they would really appreciate some intervention there. But what I want to go back to is can I ask what your view is on the current workload of our Senkos in our schools?
Well, workload for all of our teaching staff, including Senkos, is one that has been raised with me when I go into schools. It's also one that the different union representatives raise with us around workload issues, and how do we provide support, how do we provide better career pathways for people as well. So I recognise that it is challenging. I've witnessed that in schools. Knock Even is one that I've witnessed the challenges there, and I've met the principal on numerous occasions. It is an example where I did intervene and give approval for a new school to be constructed, and that is being taken forward. The nursing issue is one I absolutely agree with, that they require support in that respect, and it was part of the discussions that I had with the chairman and Michelle Guy, along with the health minister. The principal was there, and I was clear, at least Nick can correct me, that the decision to withdraw the nurses in settings is not one that I support, and I want to see reinstatement and provision enhanced rather than diluted.
Okay, well, appreciate that, and like I say, they would appreciate more, whatever help we can get with that. But to go back to the Senkos specifically, can I tell you what the assessment or the view is from the point of view of Senkos?
Need to be brief. It may not leave a lot of time for a response.
Okay. I'll just give you a couple of direct quotes from them, and I have loads, but just due to time. One of them says, "I love my job, but I honestly feel like I'm letting the children I work with down, as I cannot give them the care they need. I am now too busy completing assessments, chasing support for the children who need it, and battling with the EA. And now I hear that there will be more work put on us." Another one, "I was so angry when I listened to the department's response about what the removal of educational psychologists on our workload. They really have no idea of what is happening in reality. I'm sure they think all of this sounds so good in theory, the portal, the passports, the referral system, but they have no idea of what this actually means day to day." Can I ask you said at the start, Minister, in your brief, "I'm committed to working closely with schools." I wrote that down. Can I ask you what your view is on that? What your view is on those quotes?
Sadly not unique, and that has been my experience when I've went into schools in terms of the frustrations of the processes. Only to provide some reassurance, albeit cold comfort, to those currently that are experiencing these difficulties. Part of the end-to-end review has captured that information. That's why we've taken forward the plans that were published yesterday, and it will take time to see the benefit of that, but we have a clear focus on what needs to be done. It's how we do it and how we provide the changes that are necessary, so that you're not having to repeat those same things to me in a number of years. But that is going to require significant investment and resource to get us to the place where we are better supporting our children with special educational needs.
Without without any resources.
We're so far out of time here. I think we know the issues with Sync. We'll absolutely pick this up for further evidence sessions, but we do need to give everyone the opportunity because time is pretty much has beaten us. Peter, you were next.
Thanks very much, Chair. And just one quick question again around sort of SEN, and a comment first. The earlier, the better, Minister, and I know you get this. So, you know, I'm looking at the report, the sort of reform agenda and the action plan, and some of the priority year one actions. And can I ask you to in the early stage of a child's life, it's health, and then it transfers to education, and there's this sort of transfer of responsibility. Is there anything that can be done to better coordinate that transition? I suppose is one question that I would have, and the second one really is about just the support and whether or not the reform agenda will embed earlier ed psych and SLT support, because my understanding, and I don't get it all, but a lot of SLTs in health, and I know that the impact teams are going to change that. But is there more that can be done specifically around getting more ed psych support in earlier, maybe more speech and language support in earlier, and then just that piece around that transition from responsibility for children from health to education, and can that process be kind of managed better, something like that?
So absolutely, and I'll let Lindsay pick up on some of that earlier detail around sharing of data and so on, but part of the report published yesterday speaks to that early intervention, 2-3 years of age, but even earlier, how do we ensure that the education system is sighted on children that are coming through, that we make that preparation, and that is absolutely recognised as something that needs to be provided. So part of the designing of the 2 to 3 year olds, there'll be a bespoke programme for children with additional needs that will involve health professionals, and we're looking at an assessment centre approach for children ages 3 to 6. So where they receive preschool foundation stage education and intervention by AHPs to assess their needs, monitor their development, and determine appropriate education pathways. So there is going to be a focus on this, but Lindsay, do you want to pick up on a bit more of the detail?
Yeah, and certainly under both right support and right time, we're picking up on those points you're making. And particularly, you look at page 8 there, we're talking about an enhanced model of educational psychology, direct early intervention support. So that is about reframing the role of educational psychologists. We've heard a lot of frustration coming from them. How they're currently deployed is around assessment, referrals, which of course is important in our existing system, but actually could play a more constructive role in direct support to schools in building the capacity and capability of schools to respond early. In terms of your point around speech, language and communication, again, we've identified that as one of the highest growing categories of special educational needs. All the research tells us it is the one. If you get in early, you can have tangible longer term benefits, and so that has very much underpinned our work with the Department of Health and the Royal College around that speech, language and communications intervention toolkit and programme. Whilst this is saying pilot, test and trial, back to your earlier point, the longer term aim is to create space, to create the changes we need to make around special educational's provision, to evaluate, to monitor, to learn, but importantly to feed into longer term delivery in response to children's needs.
That's really encouraging. I think these issues that you just flagged, SLT and Ed Psych, earlier, it's just getting in too late. Earlier is better, and that is transformational for kids. I've seen it in my son. I just think the earlier the better, and let's not hang on the statement. If the right support goes in early enough, parents will be wanting statements. They won't be needing statements. They'll actually have the support that child deserves, and that will be transformational for them. Thank you, Chair.
At our concurrent briefing, let's hope the Chief Allied Health Professional can give some insight into
we'll say the same, I'm sure.
The workforce is going to come from. Danny, you're next.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. And I suppose I'll continue on from there around the statement process. This would be concerning, I'd say, for many parents listening, because the statement is so important to them to get that support. It's high in practice if we don't have allied health and early intervention in place, which we know we don't. How is this achievable? how do you get the support and need that your child will need throughout their whole time in school, and then that runs into then placements as well, because if we don't get that support rate very early, then we won't have placements rate, and we're already seeing, because we don't have enough special schools, that there is displacement already within our schools. And I'm talking to parents regularly who are saying their child who maybe would benefit from being in a unit are now already moved into mainstream, or a child who really should be in a special school is in a SPIM. This is having a knock-on effect right now as we speak. So if we could just elaborate a wee bit more on that there, because there's massive concerns around removal of the statement process, also around our classroom assistants. We need to hear what the plan is, what the pathways are going to be, what training and really the value that they bring to the system, that they are not going to be left behind, because that is the concerns out there.
There's a few questions in there. But whatever you can deliver an answer to.
All hugely important. And Danny, just let me take through at a very high level. All 39 special schools were due to get a report, I think it's later next month, because I asked EA to assess those 39 schools. What capacity is there to provide enhancement programs to extend them in order to provide more spaces. EA have also been scoping out, I've identified the need for 4 brand new special schools in Belfast and 4 outside of Belfast. So that work is being undertaken, and I hope to get information as to where that is being proposed, and then how do we take that forward. Because you're right, children, some should be in a special school, and therefore they're not in the right place. And whilst children have been given placements, I'm not sure of the exact figure, but we think that there is a couple of hundred who have been placed in schools that we don't believe is the most appropriate, but because we don't have alternatives, we're not able to put them into that right place. So we need to address that. The SPIMS has been helpful, and where you can accommodate in mainstream, I think we should. It provides a more inclusive education system, and St Patrick's this morning in Katie, there are lots of examples, them. They were able to show me the provision that they have in their specialist unit, and it works really well for the children. But it also helps the whole school, because the school is then reflective of wider society, and that's to the benefit of everybody. But we need to make sure they get the right support in the SPIMS. And the statement and process, I can understand why people fight so hard to get a statement, because they haven't got the support that they've wanted, that they believe they need, and now the frustration is, even with it, they still don't get services. And that's why we need to put this work in, so that we shouldn't have to get a statement to do the right thing. You shouldn't have to take somebody to court and say, this is what I'm entitled to. I'm taking you to a tribunal to force you to do it. That's a poor reflection on our society if that's what we're doing for our children, and that is what has been. And I want to move that away, that people don't feel the need to get a statement. And classroom assistants, and we don't have time to go into this in any great detail, but we need to make sure that we provide those pathways, career pathways, because there are some hugely capable classroom assistants that want to progress, take on more responsibility, become teachers, and there isn't the current progression opportunities for them to do that. But we also have to make sure that the resource that becomes available for schools, principals have some flexibility. So St Patrick's, Mercy in North Belfast, Boys Model, Glengormley Integrated College, there's 4 that I've been to, and there are more, where they're utilising the resource not to employ classroom assistants, but where appropriate to employ a full-time teacher that can have smaller opportunity in terms of group size, so a smaller group size to get more engaged, and educationally, they're saying to me, better outcome for the education for the young people, and also creating higher levels of independence for that young person. So there will always be examples where one-to-one classroom assistant provision has to be provided, and that is what is right. But there also has to be some flexibility where principals increasingly say to me, actually I can utilise the resource in a better way that impacts the young person, but also allows me to have a full-time teacher, where currently, even if I felt a classroom assistant was the best, I can't recruit them because they're not there. Mm-hmm. So we have to reflect what is available, and we have teachers who are qualified that can be utilised. So some schools are doing this, other schools haven't been able to do it, and there seems to be an inconsistency in terms of how the EA engage with those schools. But that is a conversation that I think we need to have, because if you speak, as you will, constituents, they will say, gold standard is, I get a statement, I get a classroom assistant, that is the gold standard for my child. And actually, that's not always the case, but that's what is very much believed. And in some cases it is, but there are other models that I think need to be looked at based upon what's happening already at an ad hoc basis within our schools. I think there's learning that we can get from that can make a big difference right across Northern Ireland.
You think it can be achieved operationally? Because it does. We've had a lot of our recommendations over the decades, and a lot of it looks great on paper, and it's grand, but when it gets to the operation side of it, it's a completely different story.
Yeah, like, listen, it's how do you put the theory and the evidence into practice is always the challenge. And we have moved beyond carrying out reviews, having research. We do have a clear view as to what we need to be implementing. It goes beyond education, but we have a key role to play in all of this. It won't work if it's only education, and that's where I need other departments, particularly health, to work with me. But if we could make this investment, it would make that difference. But we'll continue to do what we can with what we've got.
Minister, we're over your time. I'm going to ask for your indulgence. Will you take any more questions, or does your diary permit it?
I do have another meeting, which is now late.
Okay.
So
we have gone over time. So unfortunately, that does leave us where we are. Unfortunately, members, we'll certainly have a session afterwards where if there were follow-up questions, we can put those in writing from here. So thank you all for your time this afternoon. Thank you. So while the witnesses are making their...
Thank you very much, guys.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. While the witnesses are making their way out, we'll just pick up if there are any actions. So I think, first of all, before we sort of think about anything arising from the evidence session, I'm conscious not all members got in as we did run over time. For anyone who still had to ask a question, is there anything in particular you would like to bring forward as a written inquiry for the Minister? So Cara, you had indicated next.
Yeah, I think that event yesterday was absolutely incredible. I genuinely learned so much. I think maybe in our forward work programme perhaps we can look further into Irish medium education as a whole. But outside of that, I was going to inquire about the reform agenda and delivery plan with regards to SEN. Talks about, and I recognise Caleb's cause has been fantastic in leading on the post-19 provision, but I did note parents have concern about children who do have special educational needs that won't be able to partake in further education, training and employment. So what happens to those children? And there is concern from parents that they will be confined to home with no support. So I'd just like to know more about what the Education Minister has had on this issue, and if he's spoken with the Health Minister about this.
Yeah, I think that's a one we could certainly look at. I mean, my understanding is on our forward work plan we have an invite out to Caleb's cause, and I wonder whether we could maybe combine that if the schedule allows, perhaps for the EA transitions team to actually come in and to say, well, where do they sit in this transformation agenda? Because I mean, I was at the all-party group on learning disability yesterday, and you had parents there saying, my young person is 16, 17, and they've never had a transitions meeting. It's meant to start at age 14. So, we really do need to be looking at this.
Sometimes there's that feeling education goes, that's for health, but health goes, that's education. So, yeah, I think that's good.
I'm very happy to endorse that if members are agreed. Agreed. Just to bring anyone else who didn't get a question, and then I'll come back to you, Cathy, if that's okay.
No, I'm okay.
So, David,
I was going to go on the local impact teams and particularly just push on what the relationship like is with the Department of Health. So we'll get there eventually.
We'll get there. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fine. And then Michelle.
The outcomes framework. So we have a plan published, but no outcomes framework. I'm just wanting to know how we're going to measure the delivery of this if we don't have the outcomes framework.
Okay. Yeah, certainly include that on correspondence.
Maybe someone else. Local impact teams. Impact seems to be an acronym. Does anyone know what that acronym stands for? Because it was changed from integrated teams, so I'm particularly interested in why.
Multidisciplinary.
Or
multidisciplinary. It became integrated and now it's impact.
So I'm just wondering, is the integrated aspect, because we all suspected that when it was discussed at one stage that, health was slightly reticent to completely integrate. I'm just wondering whether.
I meant to actually call this group with something else.
Well, it's whether that change of name I was going to try and get at is reflective of that reticence in some way, but that's that anyway.
No, I'm not sure. I mean, I think we can certainly ask the question. I mean, there has been...
It just is putting capitals in all those documents.
There has been confusion around it. I mean, I've had back and forth with the business office around trying to get written questions in using the phrase local impact team, with them saying the department don't know what this is. So there has definitely been confusion on that, so we're happy to ask. I think the local impact teams is something we're probably all getting queries from. I think teachers and Sencos don't quite feel they understand the process yet. And I think the staff at the EA are very concerned about what's going to land on their desk very soon, that they maybe are not resourced to deal with. So I think the LITs are really important. I just checked, Colin, I don't think you had indicated. Is there anything else you wanted to ask? Oh, sorry, Michelle. Yeah.
Just related to that, is then about the costing. So there's a figure of 570 million, but it's not costed within the plan. And do the department know what those costings are? If they could provide that to us, would be good.
I think more detail on Peter, you touched on that. I think more detail on costings would be very helpful. So
and
we've got outcomes framework, costings, and timeline. Colin, nothing from you. Kathy, you'd like to come in?
Yeah, just because I think there was so much more that we wanted to ask around saying and different issues there. I was just wondering, is it in the forward work programme now that we have the report in with the action plan? Can we get the officials back in at least at a point?
On Zen.
Well, I think I offered them a briefing. So we've got that on the 26th of March. So that's I think it is timely, and I think the report. I mean, I would pass comment. How members can disagree, but has been released with minimal fanfare, which I thought was interesting. I mean, I would have expected perhaps a ministerial statement on it, but we will see. And look, I think I wanted to put on record that when the department wrote to me to say that the delivery plan was available, there was an open sort of invite put out there to say we want to engage with the committee on this. So like I think that is welcome, and I think we should take every opportunity we get to do that. Okay.
Do you want to try to bring that forward, or is that okay on 27th?
I mean, I'm certainly, I have no objection to bringing that forward if the forward work plan allows that. If members are agreed on that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The only other thing, sorry, Deputy Chair, you wanted to come in? If there's anyone.
In regard to the issue around the list needed funding, and I want to state for the record, this isn't about list need. I would be disappointed in any principal who didn't lobby and argue for the best possible facilities for their school. Every principal should be doing that. The question is the process by which public money is given out, and particularly to a school that has done so well in terms of facilities. The question has to be asked, why did they not only get more funding for a 3G pitch, but for a pitch that was being brought up to Irish League standards? Other schools don't get that. So there's a couple of anomalies here, and I would like to hear, and I mean, one of the other issues is the Minister was trying to hand it off to the EA, and of course it was the EA who handed the money out, but ultimately it's public money that's given by the department to the EA, and the Minister should be concerned about where that money is going and holding those who are handing the money out to account. But it would be useful, I think, to get in front of the committee those officials from EA who were responsible for agreeing to that funding.
Well, I think, and I want to just check with the clerk in terms of sort of remarks that I opened with the chairperson's business. Has that been noted as a request? Because I did suggest that an oral briefing from the EA officials on that would be helpful, and I do think to actually do that work of broadening out around who makes the decisions on how they prioritise these. I think that is really what members are getting at.
We got very little information about process there and how decisions are made on the basis of need. You know.
So you asked for a feasibility study. I think you've asked the Minister about his involvement there just in that session. Clarity around processes, transparency, re-thresholds.
I'll take a steer from the committee. I mean, I think just given the level of interest in it, that an oral briefing around minor works, in the round, I think would be very helpful. Sorry, Michelle, you want to come in, and then I'll bring David in. Yeah, sorry. I'll go Michelle, David, Danny. Okay.
I don't know if this is one for us, but I think something that didn't come out as well was just around kind of the community and sporting aspects. We know the Minister Lyons was involved as well, and I don't know whether there's a question for us to ask whether they considered providing funding for that pitch from a community's perspective. All the funding that has gone in has been education money, but it seems like in terms of the spec, it actually has a community and a sporting benefit as well. So it's worth the committee asking for some clarity on that from the Department of Communities.
Reasonable, yeah. I mean, certainly I know because I'm familiar with sort of community use of schools policy, and but you know there would be partnerships. But again, you would expect perhaps communities or local council to be at the table for that. So I think that's a valid question to be asking, David.
It probably is more a political point, but in terms of the process, I think there was some outline of process, and you referred to it yourself, Chair, in terms of going through the EA and being decisions made at their board, at which a number of parties have representatives. Danny referred to Belfast City Council. I can tell you if we had been sitting in City Growth or People and Communities back in the day, and something had been coming through that was 700 grand, noting or not, I think you would have had people casting an eye over it. So you know, where was scrutiny in that regard? But I think there is elements of the process that we do know about, but and should be applied to all schools that are applying in that regard. But no objection to it.
If I could add something, I think for me is I would like to see what that scheme of delegation actually is to the EA and how that operates, because again I think we're maybe making assumptions around how the processes work. So it would be good to know, because I'm really conscious that you know that there is an individual school at the heart of all this who I made that clear at the start, do not want to be caught up in the political crossfire of any of this.
Sure, there's probably not any of us, I would imagine, in this room or in few in the Assembly Chamber, I would say, who haven't at some stage pushed for a new pitch, AstroTurf pitch, 4G pitch, whatever, and they do every 10 or 20.
I'm not disputing, and I think the Deputy Chair's reference that around, you know, we all lobby, we all do, and schools do. I think that the question is, it does appear to have raised questions not about this school, but about how much of an understanding as a committee we have around how these capital decisions are made. And I think that's a perfect.
I guess what I'm referring to is the contrast between other things that need done, and sometimes these things can be drawn a contrast, but we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Sure.
Sorry. Actually, I think I'd said Danny first, and then Peter, and then Cara. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, can we go further and actually stipulate that the officials who made this decision are here in front of us, because this isn't about the school, and that was where my question was going. It's about why it's up to that level, and that to me is the key question. I reference council because it's a fraction of that cost, and public money is what we're here to scrutinise as a committee. We need those officials in front of us, because I'm not happy with statements going out on a Friday and a reference to Twitter. Who puts out a statement on a late on a Friday night because of what's on Twitter and then change it on a Sunday? I don't know. I think that's leaving a lot of questions, and anybody watching the day would have been, I'd say, a wee bit disillusioned, to be honest with you.
I think if we can get the briefing secured, then that hopefully we'll deal with any of the issues of concern that have been raised. Cara, you'd want to come in there.
I just wanted to flag EMA, so the Education Maintenance Allowance. I had spoken recently with USI. Wales has moved to increase it. Recognising the pressure that 16 to 18-year-olds currently face from a financial perspective. It was first introduced in 2004 when I was 8 years old. I'm 30 this year, and it has never increased. So I think when we look at things like inflation, increased financial pressure on our young people who are either in sixth form or in further education, it's something that we should look into more, and if that's something we could maybe write to the Education Minister on, or what conversations he's had with the Economy Minister, I think it would be beneficial for our young people.
No objection to that. I'm not sure it arose out of the briefing we've just had, but certainly I
think we're just seamless, Cara. Absolutely seamless.
We're talking about education underachievement and incentives to keep young people in education.
No, absolutely.
Sorry,
that's fine. We're just I suppose just trying to just close on issues arising. But I mean, look, if you can get it in there, get it in. That's fine. I think Peter, had you indicated?
Wait. Yeah. You know, I defer to my colleague to my right here. That was incredible. On that, it's economy. EMA is paid for by the Department of Economy and comes out of Economy. I would say I completely support it. I think we want to get something from Economy in terms of that. Just dealing with that one. Back to Liz Neal. A couple of points. First one is, I feel sorry that we spent an hour and a half on. We should stop talking about what the name of the college is. That took an hour and a half of our time, guys. Now, I got my questions in. I am really passionate about special educational needs and educational achievement and SLT and NAID Psychs and where the money's coming from and all that. But we did spend an hour and a half on a college up in Londonderry/Derry. And I think that's a shame, you know, and I realise it's in the public domain. I realise it's a current issue, but I just do not think that should have taken up that much of the committee's time. I'll be honest, and I know there'll be different views on this. I get that. I just think we had the minister here for 2 hours. You know, it's rare, but he was here, and we spent an hour and a half talking about £710,000 of money that, you know, it's been rehearsed. I'm not going to go over it again. I just want to let you know my opinion on it.
Peter,
Events, dear boy, events.
No, like I get that, Pat. But what I'm saying is, I don't know. He didn't give the pro rata how many times he's been to committee and how much time he's got. But I would say if we looked
Maybe
at
once, and it's the second time just.
in terms of timing, though, Danny. In terms of timing, I would say he's been hours for the first year more than some ministers. That's all. That's the only point I'm making. But I
think the facts bear that.
I'm also, and I think the facts, but I'm just saying, and I want to make the point, Chair, that I don't think that was the best use of time, because it gives the impression to people out there who are watching that is the biggest thing that we could ask about, and I just don't think that's. I actually don't think that's what the committee thinks. Don't think what other members think, but that's what people chose to do.
Thank you. No, I think you've made your point very, very clearly, Peter.
Okay.
But ultimately, I suppose members are free to ask.
They will take different
whatever
views,
issue
and
they
I
wish to
get
ask.
that, Chair. On because I can make a second point here on the thing about whether or not we get EA in. My view, and I'm not going to divide the committee on it, but it's just my opinion. I think we take an oral briefing around all the things that have just been discussed around that. Sorry, not an oral briefing. I think we get a written briefing first. Because otherwise it will just dominate another session, and I do think there are other things that we need to deal with. I'm not saying we dodge it, I'm not saying we don't get the information, I'm just saying rather than in the first place get an oral briefing, I think we should get a written briefing first. But if the committee decide otherwise, I'm happy with it.
Could I
Go ahead, sorry.
And I understand where Peter's coming from, but by the same token, this issue is actually quite important, and in many ways it's a microcosm of what may be happening on a larger scale, because you have the way public funds are being delivered, how they're being delivered, what processes are being used, and then you have an issue of equality among different schools, and some schools could say, you know, we have broken windows, we can't get fixed, while this school is getting not just a 3G pitch, but Irish League level football pitch. So there are serious questions to be answered there, because if this is allowed to happen, then it's going to happen again and again and again, and it's going to create greater inequality within our education system. And I think it was an important issue to deal with here today.
But I get that.
You respond briefly, and then
I get that.
Close
Some of that,
yeah.
you know, leaving aside of some of that, it's perception. Like I visited a lot of schools in a previous role. Hundreds and hundreds of schools, and you would end up in one school and it was beautiful, and just down the road there'd be one that's really, really run down. Now I'm not even going to talk about what sectors they were in. It doesn't actually matter what background the kids are, what sectors they come from, but you could go to two schools in the same town and one would be really run down and one would be brand new, and you'd go, why is their school really brand new and ours is run down? A lot of it is just about that, and I've seen that firsthand. I've seen experiences that Kathy referenced earlier on. But I do not think it's fair just to say because this pitch is X or Y, there's another school down there and it's got a hole in the door or whatever. Why is that hole in the door not fixed? That's not how this all works. And it's not just for one. I just don't believe it's for one sector.
Can I make a point of clarity, Chair?
I'll allow a point of clarity, then I'm going to just sort of summarise where we're at and try and close
I stand to be
this off.
corrected, and Danny said it right. I stand to be corrected, but I just think we're talking about this Irish League level football pitch. I haven't looked at the spec, but the pitch itself, the fencing and so on, is what makes it, I suspect, Irish League level. The pitch itself, Irish League level is similar to any of the 4G pitches that we have around the country. It's just that it has other things that requires to meet criteria for matches like that. So it's I think it's just
on the surface.
Is there a high? As I say, stand to be corrected, but my understanding was that in general it wasn't to do with this issue. That a lot of our pitches are of a similar standard. It's just that some of those other things are required to make Irish League criteria.
Why would we?
I'm going to make a suggestion. See if this maybe just does help us bring this to a conclusion. My sense of this is that whatever the views are around the amount of time that was spent on the issue and whether that was appropriate or not, there is no doubt that an issue has come to the committee's attention where there is a significant degree of uncertainty around how minor unavoidable work schemes are funded. We don't even have figures on the department's website anymore that tells us what the financial threshold is. So I think that it would be remiss of the committee not to seek an oral briefing on that. And I think that oral briefing should be around how the scheme for minor unavoidable works operates. And as I set out at the beginning of the meeting, how are the schemes identified? How are they prioritised? How are they applied for? Who makes those decisions? And I think if the Education Committee can't ask those questions, not about Lisneal, but about every single school that is vying for that money, and Peter, you set out the hundreds of schools who are all struggling with this, I think principals and school communities will want to know, how are these decisions made? Who is the decision maker in all of this? Because resource is so scarce and the need is so great. So I'm content that there is committee agreement on that. But Peter, you have said that you're maybe not on the same page. So we'll just.
I'm on the same page. I just think getting a written briefing first is more expeditious of the committee's time. I have no truck on it. How you framed it there, I certainly agree with, in that these things should be transparent, should be traceable, because that is equity for all. My suggestion was just to get a written briefing first. That's all I'm saying.
I think we've reached agreement, Cathy.
Yeah, just because I'd asked to come in after Peter, just one sentence. I don't like it being framed that we spent an hour and a half talking about Lisneal. We didn't. We spent an hour and a half talking about transparency and funding for schools.
And the Minister didn't answer one question.
It was focused around Lisneal, whether
I don't think we're going to reach agreement.
Scrutiny as a committee, it is scrutiny. That is our fundamental.
May well be, but as far as everyone seems right,
I am going to draw a line under that. What we have reached is agreement here that we would like to carry out further scrutiny around how minor capital works projects are funded and delivered, which I think is an entirely appropriate activity for the committee to be engaged in. Okay, so there's nothing else from that briefing with the Minister that arises for me other than I would suggest we continue our focus on SEN and educational underachievement, and I think when we come to forward work planning we'll maybe nail down a little bit of anything else we are keen to have in that is not currently, and I don't want to use a phrase that could be construed with capital projects that is in the pipeline for the committee's work, so let's make sure we do get the briefings that the committee is keen to focus on from here on in.
There is maybe a small point on the SEN. It was just something that the Minister had said around, I think he said hundreds of kids are currently placed in the wrong setting. I think that really feeds into what we've been saying and our concerns about next year. And I just want to reference back to what Richard Pangali had said a couple of weeks ago in our committee, that they wanted to move away from placements. So I just think we need to keep that very much in our focus going forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, there are probably multiple strands out of that action plan you could draw out, and placements is undoubtedly one of them. So we'll get that briefing, and look, if there is scope to bring it forward, then that would be welcome. But obviously, with other things that are in there that probably do fit into the same space in terms of SEN. Okay. Are we content to move on to the next item? So item 7's not been removed from the agenda as we are going to reschedule the NIPSO briefing, and I would just like to emphasise that I trust committee still retains that interest in getting that briefing on that particular report. So look, that takes us to item 8, which is correspondence. Refer members to pages 211 to 479, where we have 21 items tabled under correspondence, and then there were a couple of additional items that came in on table papers that I would just draw members' attention to. Summary notes at page 211, and I will just go through the items that need any particular input from committee. So item 8.2 on page 214. It's correspondence from the Committee for Finance in respect of the relationship between sick absence and vacancies, and I would propose at this stage that we note, unless members have a particular interest that they want to take up for any future briefings. I propose we note. Okay, great. Item 8.4 on page 243, it's further correspondence from the Committee for Finance, and it's asking the committee to submit a return indicating its view on the Department of Education's 25 to 26 budget. I'm going to ask the clerk to speak to this in terms of the best process for this, but I would certainly be willing to propose that we do seek further information, certainly collate what information we have on the 25-26 budget at this stage, and if on the back of that we feel any further material is required, we can seek that. And I would just emphasise, probably feeds into forward work planning, we still haven't had our capital budget briefing from the department, which I think feels to me like a really big gap. We can't just talk about resource on this, so
that might be worth considering here. But Clark, if I could ask you to speak to that item, and then we can make a decision.
Yeah, so last week we received correspondence from the Finance Committee outlining the budget timeframe and just additional baseline information about that, but we haven't actually had an update from the department yet. We have asked the department about an equality impact assessment of the 25-26 budget, so we can ask for a written and then oral briefing as soon as possible, just to
So are members content, given the timescales for the end of February, that we seek a fairly urgent written briefing on this, but that may, I think, it will probably feed into an oral briefing from there. Are we agreed? Agreed. Item 8.5 on page 245, it's a response from the department regarding the recommendations in the QUB Nuffield report on experiences in education among minority ethnic groups in Northern Ireland, and that fed out of our evidence session that we had around that issue. So the response indicates that the officials are reviewing a previous consultation on policy changes in this area dating back to 2022, and will be presenting proposals to the Minister for his consideration, and some of those policy proposals will link in directly to the Nuffield report. I would like to suggest we note at this stage, but possibly through yourself, Clark, perhaps one to just return to, if we can just bring it back to an agenda, maybe for committee's attention to flag if we don't hear anything, possibly before summer recess on where that policy work is. We can revisit that. Would we be agreed? Yeah. Item 8.8, page 348, is a response from the Department of Education regarding cooperation with the voluntary and community sector on public sector policy development. That was a query that actually originated through the Committee for Communities. So would members be agreed that we refer the correspondence on to that committee? Agreed. Item 8.9, page 352, is a response from the Minister indicating his intention to publish the SEN delivery plan. And I think kind of that's been overtaken. We've discussed that today, and we're going to seek further briefings, so I propose we note. We agreed? Yep. Item 8.10, page 356, it's correspondence from the Committee for Communities, providing a copy of correspondence it has sent to the Department of Education regarding the Pensions Bill Committee report. The Committee for Communities is asking the Department for Education to introduce pensions to the curriculum as part of Learning for Life and Work. I would propose that we note, but that we await a response from the Department to the Communities Committee, and perhaps just register our interest in that we would like to see a copy of that coming back when that's provided. Agreed? Mm-hmm. Item 8.12 on page 362 is a response from the Department of Education on the zero emissions vehicles and fleet management. Are members content to note and forward the response to the Committee for Infrastructure, who initially raised it? We agreed. Item 8.13, page 366, is a response from the Department of Education indicating it does intend to carry out an equality impact assessment in respect of the draft budget 25-26. Are members content to note and forward that response to the Committee for Justice, who had raised the matter originally? We agreed. Mm-hmm. Item 8.14, page 368, is a response from the Department of Education on work being done around placements for September 25, and also the specific question the committee had raised around why the department does not have access to information on the current numbers of allied health professionals currently available to the education system to support SEN pupils. So the department's response, and I think we may want to have a think about how we respond on this. It states that the EA SEN capacity team is leading the work on ensuring appropriate provision, and that it does not have access to data on the AHP workforce responsibility, as this is the responsibility of the Department of Health. But it does suggest that the Department of Health are working with the Public Health Agency to collate up-to-date information to assist in providing a baseline of AHP resource supporting children with SEN. So sorry, that was a lot of words there, but I mean, effectively the department are saying it's not us, and I think that was the concern the committee raised, that we really feel it should be them in conjunction with health. Very happy to open this up just for further discussion. I mean, I assume this will probably be an issue that will be dealt with at our concurrent meeting, and it might be better, rather than engaging in back and forth written correspondence, that we deal with it there. Mm-hmm. But I would certainly want to note that pretty clearly, potentially for any briefing note for members for both committees that comes through, that this issue, that I think the data around workforce is really crucial here. And I think some of the questioning that we went through today indicated that we're still not quite sure where we're at with that. So that would be my suggestion. But Danny, were you looking at that?
No, I totally agree, because this is the biggest concern that we have when we've had all the presentations. It's like building a house with a deck of cards. If we don't have health in at the very beginning, even the talk of removing statements, how much fear will that send to parents who have to fight so hard to get that statement, and then they don't even know how many health professionals that are needed. It's really scary that we've got an action plan that came forward and the fundamentals aren't there.
Well, we'll look forward to the briefing session at Middletown, and I'm sure somebody around this room will ask that question. So, is there anything else we want to add at this
I
stage?
can ensure that they know that is.
Yes, I think. I think.
You think they could guess that one?
They might guess that's
I
coming.
think I'll guess that one.
Okay. That's fine, and look, we'll pick that up following the concluded meeting. Item 8.15, page 371, it's correspondence from the Committee for Finance. They're keeping us busy this week, highlighting its concerns with the EDIS Strategic Partner and School Management System project. And they've just raised a concern how far the project proceeded before its cancellation. And they were unhappy with some of the language and phraseology used by the EA to provide its rationale for the decision not to proceed. Happy to open up to seek members' views. I think it's probably timely to go back to the EA for an update on the EDIS project itself and where it is at. Beyond that, happy to hear from other members. Michelle?
I mean, I think I raised this before, maybe this is where this correspondence came from, but they use the word catastrophic for schools. That's pretty dramatic, and I think we definitely need to know more about how something could be catastrophic and that we didn't get it stopped sooner than that. So I think if we write to them, or if they can come in and actually brief us, like I say, I've said that before, I think it would be really necessary to understand what's happened there.
And I think
there's a lot of money being spent for something
it
that
is
had a catastrophic error.
To pick up your point in catastrophic, it was noted as being catastrophic if the project milestone wasn't met, but I'm assuming by pulling out of the project the milestone's not going to be met. So what is the catastrophic outcome we're now looking at? So I do think we need to hear from the EA as to what that really referred to, and to seek a bit more detail on that. I would be content that we do that in writing, but that if when that comes in we're not satisfied, that we do move to an oral briefing. And I know, Michelle, you have expressed an interest in that previously, but are members agreed with that as an approach?
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Item 8.17, page 374, it's correspondence from the Department of Education providing a summary of responses from a consultation on proposed changes to qualifications performance measures. This was a really, really technical document, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on interpreting that, and I am going to propose we note, but if members feel there is scope for a briefing on this, I'm not going to stand in anyone's way, but proposing we note at this stage. Okay, item 8.24. In tabled papers as a guidance note from the Public Accounts Committee in regard to primacy, and we have had this issue raise its head in the committee around the primacy of PAC around audit office reports and their sort of first dibs effectively on scrutinising those. I mean, I'm going to propose that we note, unless members have anything they particularly want to raise in relation to that. No, agreed, we note. And then finally, in table papers also, we have a letter from the Christian Institute regarding what they are suggesting is misinformation that has been presented to the committee in relation to some of the rights-based considerations around RSE. I am going to propose that we note for the inquiry, and that those comments should be factored in, and I'm sure there will be discussion in the report around how the rights-based issues are framed in any material in the report. So I think for the clerk and her team around that, it's important those comments are noted and considered. So our members agreed. Peter, do you want to
Yeah, just to check in terms of what you just said, does that then form part of the inquiry evidence?
No, I mean, I'm certainly happy.
Yep.
It's a letter. I'm certainly happy to propose that it is part of the inquiry. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. I think it needs to be factored into the thinking around the formation of the report, so it should be part of the final evidence that can be considered.
Chair. That's fine.
Okay, we agreed.
Yep. Agreed.
So other than that, are members content to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note at page 211? Yeah, I'm content. There's a 4 corners invite. I'm content we note that for diaries. That's fine. Thank you. Yes, so we agreed we'll deal with that as per the note at page 211. Okay, so that takes us on to item 9, and that's the forward work programme, draft forward work programme at page 484. I think that our conversation last week, where we got a bit more time to discuss the forward work plan in detail, was really helpful, and I have to say I'm content that the items we've got in there broadly reflect what committee has been asking for. I know new stuff was brought forward this week, and that's a continual process. So I'll ask the clerk to speak to just where we're at the minute, if there's anything in particular. But
before the clerk comes in, Chair, I know we asked that EA officials be brought in front of the committee. I mean, can that be done as a matter of urgency? I mean, there's no point leaving this for another 4 or 5 weeks. Yeah, you know.
You did say that last week as well. Urgent things should
yes,
be,
well, I can certainly
urgent.
ascertain the quickest that they can come.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
think we
I
had
mean,
talked about building slack into the forward work programme to allow for
I think they would want to come in and clear the air. I think that's what's going to need to happen.
Yeah, you would hope that there would be an openness to doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we can certainly make that request. Okay.
Thank you.
Deputy Chair. Clark, is there anything you want to add in terms of the forward work plan at this
so
stage?
just I tried to, because there was a bit of confusion, I tried to represent things that are like maybe still to be finally confirmed, and the indicative dates that we're going for. We've confirmed more actually even in the last couple of days, but the Integrated Education Day on the 12th of March, there's confirmation of all of that. In fact, we have almost too many stakeholders for that one.
Yeah.
So that might be tipping into a second meeting. We expect the task force on controlled schools management on the 5th of March. They just have to get final confirmation of that. What else? Teaching assistant academics are going to come quite soon. Mark, you have the date for that one, 26th of February. So they were able to bring that more current one, a bit more currently as you asked, and we'll certainly see if EA can maybe present officials for some of those discussions that we had earlier.
Pleased to see the Ulster University academics in on that report, and I think there's potentially some scope as well for one of their team who actually covers issues around EdPsych and actually trains EdPsychs on there to hopefully join that briefing. We're seeing what we can do on that, and I think that would be a good spread of evidence. Okay, so are members content to endorse the forward work plan as drafted at the moment? We agreed? Okay, item 10, any other business? Is there any other business? No. So item 11, date, time and place of next meeting, and that is Wednesday the 12th of February, 2 p.m, room 29. Just leaves me to put the question that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed?
Yep. Agreed. Well done, Chair. Well done, easy one.
Committee room 29, sound. 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 Committee room 29, sound.